The emergence of the Illyrians as a distinct cultural and ethnic group represents one of the most significant demographic transformations in Bronze Age southeastern Europe. Archaeological evidence from sites across the Western Balkans reveals a complex process of migration, cultural synthesis, and regional adaptation that unfolded over nearly a millennium, fundamentally reshaping the human landscape of the Adriatic littoral and its mountainous hinterlands. The earliest indicators of what would become recognisably Illyrian material culture appear in the archaeological record around 2000 BC, coinciding with broader patterns of Indo-European expansion across the Balkan Peninsula. Excavations at key sites such as Gradina on the Bosna River and the stratified deposits at Vucedol in eastern Croatia reveal a gradual but unmistakable shift in ceramic traditions, metallurgical techniques, and settlement organisation that distinguishes these communities from their predecessors. The transition was neither abrupt nor uniform across the region, with coastal areas showing different developmental trajectories compared to inland mountain valleys. The geographic extent of early Illyrian settlements stretched along an impressive arc of territory, encompassing roughly 160,000 square kilometres of diverse topography. From the Julian Alps in what is now Slovenia, their territory extended southward along the entire eastern Adriatic coast, reaching as far as the Sauronian Mountains in southern Albania. This vast region included not only the narrow coastal plains and countless islands of the Adriatic archipelago, but also the rugged interior highlands of the Dinaric Alps, with their characteristic karst formations, deep valleys, and isolated mountain plateaus. The coastal settlements displayed remarkable adaptation to maritime conditions. At sites like Issa on the island of Vis and the early phases of Salona near modern Split, archaeologists have uncovered evidence of sophisticated harbour installations, including stone-lined anchorages and what appear to be primitive lighthouse foundations. These coastal communities developed distinctive architectural features, including houses built with carefully fitted limestone blocks and roofing systems designed to withstand the fierce bora winds that sweep down from the mountains. The inhabitants of these settlements showed clear evidence of maritime specialisation, with fishing implements, boat-building tools and navigation aids appearing regularly in excavated contexts. Inland settlement patterns revealed a markedly different adaptation strategy. The mountainous regions of Bosnia, Herzegovina and Montenegro became home to fortified communities perched on commanding heights, taking advantage of natural defensive positions while maintaining access to river valleys and mountain passes. These settlements, known as oppida, represented a revolutionary approach to Bronze Age urbanism in the Balkans. Unlike the sprawling, undefended villages characteristic of earlier periods, Illyrian oppidae featured sophisticated defensive systems, including multiple concentric walls, carefully planned gates with complex approach routes, and internal organisation that maximised both defensive capability and economic efficiency. The oppidum at Daorsen, located on a limestone plateau above the Neretva River, exemplifies this settlement type. Archaeological investigations have revealed a complex of structures enclosed by massive stone walls reaching heights of 8 metres in some sections. The walls incorporated natural rock formations into their defensive scheme, while featuring carefully engineered gates that forced approaching visitors or attackers through narrow, easily controlled passages. Within the fortified perimeter, excavations have uncovered evidence of specialised craft quarters, storage facilities, and what appears to be a central administrative complex distinguished by its superior construction and prominent location. The material culture of these early Illyrian communities displayed both continuity with local Bronze Age traditions and innovation reflecting new cultural influences. Pottery production underwent significant transformation during this period, with the emergence of distinctive vessel forms that would remain characteristic of Illyrian ceramic traditions for centuries. The most recognizable of these was a particular type of large storage jar featuring distinctive handles shaped like stylized animal heads, often interpreted as representing bulls or horses. These vessels, found consistently across Illyrian sites from Slovenia to Albania, suggest not only shared cultural practices, but also possible religious or symbolic significance. Burial practices provide particularly revealing insights into early Illyrian social organisation and belief systems. The transition from earlier cremation practices to inhumation burials marked a fundamental shift in attitudes toward death and the afterlife. Excavations at the necropolis of Glasinac in Bosnia have revealed elaborate burial chambers constructed from carefully fitted stone slabs, containing not only human remains but also extensive grave goods, including weapons, jewellery and ceramic vessels. The orientation of these burials, consistently aligned along a north-south axis, suggests standardised religious practices that extended across the entire Illyrian cultural sphere. The grave goods themselves reveal sophisticated metalworking capabilities that distinguished Illyrian craftsmen from their contemporaries. Bronze weapons found in these contexts include distinctively shaped spearheads with elongated sockets and decorative elements, swords with characteristic pommel designs, and axes featuring complex geometric patterns. The quality of metalwork demonstrates not only technical proficiency, but also access to raw materials, suggesting extensive trade networks that connected Illyrian communities with copper sources in the interior mountains and tin deposits from more distant regions. Jewellery recovered from burial contexts provides evidence of sophisticated aesthetic sensibilities and possible social stratification. Bronze fibulae, used to fasten clothing, display intricate geometric designs that would become hallmarks of Illyrian decorative art. These pieces often incorporated amber beads, indicating trade connections with Baltic regions, and occasionally featured gold inlay work that required considerable technical skill. The distribution of such high-quality items within burial contexts suggests emerging social hierarchies, with certain individuals having access to luxury goods and specialized craftsmanship. The development of iron technology among the Illyrians occurred somewhat later than in neighbouring regions, with the earliest iron artifacts appearing in archaeological contexts dating to approximately 1000 BC. However, when Illyrian smiths did begin working with iron, they quickly developed distinctive techniques and forms. Iron weapons from this transitional period show clear continuity with earlier bronze prototypes while taking advantage of the superior properties of the new material. Swords became longer and more robust, spearheads developed more effective penetrating points, and agricultural tools showed significant improvements in durability and functionality. Agricultural practices during this formative period adapted to the diverse environmental conditions across Illyrian territory. In coastal regions, communities developed terraced farming systems that maximize arable land on steep hillsides while preventing soil erosion. Archaeological evidence from sites like Pharos on the island of Var reveals sophisticated irrigation systems that channeled seasonal rainfall into storage cisterns carved directly into bedrock. These installations required considerable community effort to construct and maintain, suggesting well-organised social structures capable of coordinating large-scale public works projects. Mountain communities developed different agricultural strategies suited to higher elevations and shorter growing seasons. Excavations at highland sites have revealed evidence of specialised livestock management, with stone-built enclosures designed for sheep and goat herding. The presence of distinctive ceramic vessels associated with dairy processing suggests that these communities developed sophisticated techniques for preserving milk products, essential for surviving harsh mountain winters. Seasonal migration patterns, evidenced by temporary structures at various elevations, indicate that some communities practice transhumance, moving livestock between summer mountain pastures and winter valleys. The relationship between early Illyrian communities and their neighbours reveals complex patterns of interaction, conflict and cultural exchange. Along the northern borders of Illyrian territory, archaeological evidence suggests regular contact with Celtic populations expanding southward from Central Europe. This interaction is most clearly visible in the adoption of certain Celtic metalworking techniques and decorative motifs, particularly in regions of modern-day Slovenia and northern Croatia. However, Illyrian communities maintained their distinct cultural identity, adapting foreign influences to fit existing traditions rather than wholesale adoption of external practices. Eastern boundaries brought Illyrian communities into contact with Thracian peoples, creating a cultural frontier zone where material culture shows mixed characteristics. Sites in the upper valleys of the Morava and Vardar rivers contain artifacts displaying both Illyrian and Thracian features, suggesting either mixed populations or intensive trade relationships. The distinctive Illyrian pottery traditions, however, maintained their integrity even in these border regions, indicating strong cultural cohesion despite external influences. The development of trade networks during this period laid foundations for later Illyrian economic prosperity. Archaeological evidence from coastal sites reveals the presence of exotic materials, including obsidian from Mediterranean volcanic islands, high-quality flint from distant sources, and decorative shells that could only have originated in warm southern waters. The distribution of these materials throughout Illyrian territory, including remote mountain settlements, indicates sophisticated exchange systems that connected diverse communities across challenging terrain. Linguistic evidence, though limited for this early period, supports archaeological findings regarding Illyrian cultural distinctiveness. Place names preserved in later classical sources show consistent patterns that distinguish Illyrian linguistic features from neighbouring Indo-European languages. The prevalence of certain phonetic patterns and word formations across the entire region suggests linguistic unity that paralleled material culture similarities, reinforcing the picture of a coherent cultural group despite geographic dispersal. Religious practices during this formative period, reconstructed from archaeological evidence and later historical sources, centered around natural features and ancestral veneration. Hilltop sanctuaries, often associated with the same elevated positions chosen for defensive settlements, contained votive offerings including miniature weapons, ceramic vessels, and animal bones from sacrificial rituals. The consistent association of these religious sites with prominent landscape features suggests that Illyrian spirituality was deeply connected to territorial identity and community defense. The emergence of specialized craft production during this period indicates increasing social complexity and economic differentiation. Workshop areas identified within larger settlements show evidence of dedicated spaces for metalworking, pottery production, and textile manufacture. The standardization of certain artifact types across wide geographic areas suggests not only shared cultural practices, but also possible systems of craft specialization and inter-community exchange that prefigured later urban development. By the dawn of the first millennium BC, the cultural foundations established during the Bronze Age had evolved into increasingly sophisticated political structures that would define Illyrian society for the next 5 centuries. The scattered settlements and emerging social hierarchies of the previous era coalesced into distinct tribal confederations, each controlling substantial territories and developing unique governance systems adapted to their specific geographic and economic circumstances. The Delmatae emerged as perhaps the most formidable of these confederations, controlling the mountainous interior regions of what is now central and southern Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and northern Montenegro. Their territory encompassed the challenging terrain of the central Dinaric Alps, where limestone plateaus intersected with deep river valleys and isolated mountain basins. Archaeological evidence from their primary strongholds, including the extensively excavated site of Delminium near modern-day Tomislavgrad, reveals sophisticated urban planning that maximized both defensive capabilities and administrative efficiency. The settlement featured multiple terraced levels carved into the hillside, with the uppermost tier reserved for what appears to have been a governing council complex, distinguished by its superior masonry and central courtyard arrangement. Delmatay political organisation centred around a warrior aristocracy that derived its authority from successful cattle raiding expeditions and control of mountain passes crucial for trans-Balkan trade. Their society operated on principles of martial excellence, where social status directly correlated with proven combat ability and the capacity to lead successful raids against neighbouring communities. Young men underwent rigorous training in mountain warfare techniques, learning to navigate treacherous terrain while carrying full battle equipment and mastering the use of distinctively curved Delmatay swords that proved devastatingly effective in close-quarters combat among rocky outcroppings. The internal governance structure of the Delmatay Confederation relied on assemblies of proven warriors who elected temporary war leaders during periods of conflict while maintaining a council of elders for peacetime administration. This system proved remarkably adaptable, allowing rapid mobilization for military campaigns while ensuring stable governance during extended periods of relative peace. Archaeological evidence from administrative buildings within Delmatay settlements includes clay tablets bearing what appear to be inventory records, suggesting sophisticated systems for tracking communal resources and coordinating large-scale military operations. Along the northern Adriatic coast, the Liburni developed a markedly different political structure adapted to their maritime environment and extensive island territories. The Confederation stretched from the Istrian Peninsula southward to the Karka River, encompassing hundreds of islands and coastal settlements that required naval coordination rather than land-based military organisation. The Liburni became renowned throughout the ancient world for their distinctive warships, known as Liburni, which featured shallow drafts perfect for navigating among islands and conducting swift coastal raids. Liburni society organised around maritime clans, each controlling specific islands or coastal segments and maintaining hereditary rights to particular fishing grounds and anchorages. Their political assemblies took place on the island of Apsyrtides, modern-day Kres, where representatives from each clan gathered annually to coordinate naval operations, resolve territorial disputes, and elect fleet commanders for major expeditions. These assemblies operated according to maritime law traditions that recognized the unique challenges of governing scattered island communities, with decisions requiring consensus among clan leaders rather than simple majority rule. The economic foundation of Liburni power rested on their mastery of Adriatic piracy, which they conducted with such skill and coordination that even Greek and later Roman sources acknowledged their naval superiority in regional waters. The raids extended far beyond mere coastal harassment, encompassing sophisticated intelligence networks that tracked merchant shipping patterns and seasonal trade routes. Captured vessels and cargo were distributed according to complex formulas that ensured equitable sharing among participating clans, while providing substantial portions for communal fleet maintenance and expansion. In the southeastern regions of Illyrian territory, the RDAI Confederation controlled the fertile valleys and coastal plains around Lake Skadar and the mouths of major rivers including the Drin and Bujana. Their political organisation reflected the agricultural wealth of their territory, with governance structures that emphasised land management and agricultural coordination rather than purely military leadership. The RDA developed sophisticated irrigation systems that required coordinated labour from multiple communities, fostering political institutions capable of managing complex hydraulic projects and seasonal agricultural cycles. RDI settlements featured distinctive architectural elements, including large communal granaries constructed with advanced ventilation systems to prevent spoilage during long storage periods. These installations served not only practical functions, but also political purposes, as control over grain storage translated directly into political influence during periods of scarcity. The Confederation's ruling council included representatives from major agricultural districts, each responsible for coordinating planting schedules, labour allocation, and surplus distribution within their territories. The warrior aristocracy among the RDI differed significantly from their mountain counterparts, focusing on river warfare and amphibious operations rather than highland raiding. Their military elite trained extensively in fighting from boats along rivers and marshlands, developing specialised tactics for combat in waterlogged terrain. Archaeological excavations at RDA military sites have uncovered distinctive weapons including long spears designed for thrusting from boats and shields, with reinforced edges capable of deflecting attacks while maintaining manoeuvrability in confined spaces. Further north, the Apides Confederation occupied the transitional zone between the Adriatic coastal regions and the interior Alpine valleys, controlling crucial mountain passes that connected Italian markets with Balkan resources. Their territory encompassed the modern-day regions of Lika, Gorski Kotar, and parts of Istria, areas characterized by dense forests, rushing rivers, and defensible mountain valleys. The Apides developed a political system that balanced the competing demands of maintaining control over lucrative trade routes while managing relationships with both coastal and interior neighbours. Iapedes settlements typically occupied elevated positions overlooking river valleys, with elaborate fortification systems that took advantage of natural rock formations while incorporating sophisticated engineering techniques. Their primary stronghold at Metulum, located on a commanding height above the Una River, featured concentric defensive walls with carefully designed sally ports that allowed defenders to launch surprise attacks against besieging forces. The settlement's internal organisation included specialised quarters for different crafts, with metalworking areas positioned to take advantage of water power from mountain streams. The political authority of Iapedes leaders derived largely from their ability to negotiate safe passage agreements with various trading partners while maintaining the military capability to enforce these arrangements. Their confederation operated through a system of rotating leadership, with different clans assuming primary responsibility for external relations during specific seasons corresponding to major trading periods. This arrangement ensured that no single clan could monopolize the benefits of trade route control while maintaining collective security against external threats. In the southern coastal regions, the Taulanti Confederation controlled territories extending from the Shkumbin River southward to the Saronian Mountains, encompassing some of the most fertile agricultural land in the entire Illyrian sphere. Their political organisation reflected the wealth generated by their agricultural surplus and strategic position, controlling access to interior trade routes. The Taulantia developed urban centres that served as regional market hubs, with Epidamnos serving as their primary commercial and administrative centre. Taulanti's society featured a more stratified social structure than other Illyrian confederations, with distinct classes of warriors, merchants, craftsmen, and agricultural workers. Their ruling elite maintained power through a combination of military prowess and commercial acumen, with leading families controlling both large agricultural estates and trading enterprises that extended throughout the Mediterranean. The Confederation's political assemblies included not only warrior representatives, but also merchant delegates, reflecting the crucial role of trade in their economic and political systems. The development of warrior aristocracies across all Illyrian confederations followed similar patterns despite regional variations in specific practices and organisational details. Young men from prominent families underwent extensive military training that began in childhood and continued through their early 20s. This training encompassed not only weapons handling and combat techniques, but also leadership skills, strategic thinking, and the complex honour codes that governed warrior behaviour. Cattle raiding served as both an economic activity and a rite of passage for aspiring warriors throughout Illyrian society. These expeditions required careful planning, intimate knowledge of terrain, and the ability to coordinate movements across difficult country while avoiding detection by enemies. Successful raids brought not only material wealth in the form of livestock and captives, but also enhanced social status for participants and their families. The distribution of raid proceeds followed established customs that ensured appropriate shares for participants, while providing portions for community defence and religious obligations. The practice of piracy, particularly among coastal confederations, operated according to similarly complex social and economic rules. Piratical expeditions required significant investment in vessels, equipment, and provisions, with costs typically shared among participating families or clans. The division of captured goods followed intricate formulas that considered factors including the relative contributions of different participants, the risks undertaken, and the ongoing needs of the maritime community for vessel maintenance and replacement. Trade networks connecting Illyrian confederations with Greek colonies along the Adriatic coast developed gradually throughout this period, fundamentally altering economic relationships and political dynamics across the region. The establishment of Epidamnos around 627 BC marked a crucial turning point in these relationships, as Greek colonists sought to establish permanent commercial relationships with Illyrian communities rather than simply conducting occasional trading expeditions. Initial contacts between Illyrian confederations and Greek colonists involved careful negotiations that respected the territorial claims and political autonomy of both parties. The Greeks brought manufactured goods including fine pottery, metalwork and luxury items that appealed to Illyrian aristocratic tastes, while Illyrian communities provided raw materials, including metals, livestock, and agricultural products that Greek colonies needed for survival and prosperity. The development of Apollonia as a major Greek colony further expanded these commercial relationships, creating multiple contact points between Greek and Illyrian cultures. Unlike purely extractive colonial relationships common elsewhere in the Mediterranean, the Greek colonies in Illyrian territory operated more as trading partners than as dominant powers, largely due to the military capabilities and political sophistication of the Illyrian confederations they encountered. These commercial relationships gradually influenced Illyrian political development, as confederation leaders recognized the advantages of maintaining stable, peaceful relations with Greek colonies. Some confederations established formal agreements that guaranteed safe passage for Greek merchants in exchange for preferential trading terms and access to Greek manufactured goods. These arrangements required sophisticated diplomatic capabilities and helped foster the development of more complex political institutions within Illyrian society. Religious practices during this period reflected both indigenous traditions and gradually increasing Greek influence, creating syncretic belief systems that maintained distinctively Illyrian characteristics while incorporating selected foreign elements. Indigenous Illyrian deities continued to receive veneration at traditional hilltop sanctuaries, where archaeological evidence reveals ongoing sacrificial activities and votive offerings that maintained continuity with earlier religious practices. The cult of the Great Goddess, evidenced by numerous female figurines found throughout Illyrian territory, remained central to religious life across all confederations. These figurines, typically carved from local stone or cast in bronze, display consistent iconographic elements, including elaborate headdresses, prominent breasts, and ritual objects that suggest roles in fertility and agricultural ceremonies. The widespread distribution of similar figurines across diverse Illyrian territories indicates shared religious concepts that transcended political boundaries. Mountain sanctuaries continued to serve as important religious centres, with sites like the sanctuary at Konjic in Bosnia revealing evidence of continuous use throughout this period. These locations typically featured natural rock formations that served as altars, surrounded by artificial terraces where worshippers could gather for communal ceremonies. Votive offerings recovered from these sites include miniature weapons, ceramic vessels, and animal bones that indicate sacrificial rituals designed to ensure military success and community protection. The gradual influence of Greek religious traditions manifested primarily in urban centres where contact with Greek colonists was most intensive. Archaeological evidence from these locations includes imported Greek pottery used in religious contexts, suggesting the adoption of certain Greek ritual practices alongside traditional Illyrian ceremonies. However, this influence remained superficial, with fundamental religious concepts and practices maintaining their indigenous character throughout the period. The transformation of Illyrian tribal confederations into centralized monarchies represented one of the most significant political developments in the Western Balkans during the 5th and 4th centuries BC. The decentralized warrior societies that had dominated the region for centuries gradually gave way to powerful kingdoms capable of projecting authority across vast territories and engaging with major Mediterranean powers as equals. This consolidation occurred through a combination of military conquest, strategic marriages, economic control, and the establishment of permanent administrative centres that could coordinate increasingly complex governmental functions. The process began earliest among the Ardii, where the fertile river valleys and coastal plains provided the agricultural surplus necessary to support professional armies and permanent administrative bureaucracies. Around 400 BC, a warrior named Bardilis emerged from the traditional clan structure to establish what classical sources recognize as the first true Illyrian kingdom. Unlike previous war leaders who held temporary authority during specific campaigns, Bardilis maintained permanent control over military forces and established a capital at Skodra, strategically positioned to control both riverine and coastal trade routes. Bardilis transformed traditional Illyrian military organization by creating standing units of professional soldiers who owed personal loyalty to the king rather than to clan leaders. These troops received regular pay from royal treasuries, freeing them from seasonal agricultural obligations that had previously limited campaign durations. The king's bodyguard, numbering approximately 300 elite warriors, served as the core of this new military system, with members selected based on proven combat ability rather than aristocratic birth. Archaeological excavations at Skodra have revealed barracks complexes capable of housing several thousand soldiers, complete with armories, training grounds, and administrative buildings for military logistics. The architectural development of Skodra itself reflected the new political realities of centralized monarchy. Unlike traditional Illyrian settlements that grew organically around defensive positions, the royal capital featured planned construction designed to project royal authority and accommodate the complex needs of territorial administration. The royal palace complex, constructed on the highest point within the city's defensive walls, included not only residential quarters for the royal family, but also audience halls for receiving foreign ambassadors, treasury buildings for storing royal wealth, and administrative offices for managing territorial governance. The palace's throne room, reconstructed from archaeological remains and classical descriptions, measured approximately 30 metres in length and featured elaborate stone columns supporting a timber roof decorated with bronze fittings. The throne itself, carved from local limestone and inlaid with precious metals, occupied a raised platform at the far end of the hall, positioned to maximise the psychological impact on visitors approaching through this chamber's length. Wall paintings, traces of which remain visible in protected sections, depicted scenes of royal hunts and military victories that reinforced the monarch's connection to traditional warrior values while emphasising the unprecedented scale of royal power. The establishment of permanent capitals required sophisticated logistical systems to supply urban populations that could no longer sustain themselves through traditional agricultural and pastoral activities. Royal administrators developed complex taxation systems that extracted agricultural surpluses from rural communities while providing protection and infrastructure development in return. Clay tablets recovered from administrative archives at Skodra record detailed inventories of grain stores, livestock herds, and craft production that indicate systematic resource management on a scale previously unknown in Illyrian society. Economic foundations of these emerging kingdoms rested heavily on control of Adriatic trade routes that connected Italian markets with Balkan resources and Eastern Mediterranean luxury goods. The Ardii kingdom's strategic position allowed royal officials to impose transit taxes on merchant caravans travelling between coastal ports and interior regions, generating substantial revenues that funded military expansion and administrative development. Archaeological evidence from customs posts along major trade routes reveals standardized weights and measures that facilitated commercial transactions while ensuring accurate tax collection. Silver mining operations in the mountainous interior provided another crucial source of royal revenue. The mines at Damastion, located in the Upper Drene Valley, produced high-quality silver ore that Illyrian monarchs transformed into standardized coinage systems. The earliest Illyrian coins, minted around 350 BC, featured royal portraits on the obverse and symbols of royal authority, including crowns, sceptres, and military insignia on the reverse. These coins serve not only as convenient media of exchange, but also as propaganda tools that spread recognition of royal authority throughout territories where they circulated. The development of Illyrian coinage systems reflected sophisticated understanding of monetary economics and international trade practices. Royal mints produced coins in multiple denominations, corresponding to different commercial needs, from small bronze pieces suitable for local market transactions to large silver issues designed for major commercial dealings and diplomatic payments. The weight standards of Illyrian coins aligned with those used by Greek colonies and Macedonian kingdoms, facilitating international trade while maintaining distinctive Illyrian iconographic elements that asserted political independence. Military organisation under the new monarchical systems represented a revolutionary departure from traditional tribal warfare practices. Professional armies replaced seasonal warrior bands, with soldiers receiving standardised equipment, regular training, and systematic tactical instruction. The famous Illyrian light infantry, known throughout the ancient world for their mobility and effectiveness in rough terrain, developed during this period as royal military commanders adapted traditional mountain warfare techniques to the needs of territorial conquest and defence. Illyrian light infantry units typically consisted of 500 to 1,000 men organised into smaller tactical groups of 50 warriors each. These soldiers carried distinctive oval shields made from leather stretched over wooden frames and reinforced with bronze fittings, providing protection while maintaining the mobility essential for their tactical role. Their primary weapons included javelins with iron points designed for both throwing and close combat, short swords optimized for fighting in confined spaces, and long daggers that served as backup weapons and utility tools. The tactical employment of Illyrian light infantry emphasized speed, surprise, and intimate knowledge of local terrain. These units excelled at ambush warfare, conducting rapid strikes against enemy formations before withdrawing to prepared positions where their mobility advantages could be maximized. Training regimens included extensive marching exercises in full equipment across challenging mountain terrain, developing the physical conditioning necessary for sustained operations in the rugged landscapes that characterized much of Illyrian territory. Cavalry units, though less numerous than infantry forces, played crucial roles in royal military organisation. Illyrian horses, bred in the mountain valleys and coastal plains, were smaller than the mounts used by Macedonian or Thessalian cavalry, but possessed exceptional endurance and sure-footedness in difficult terrain. Royal cavalry typically numbered between 200 and 500 men, equipped with longer spears than infantry units, and trained in both mounted combat and dismounted fighting when terrain conditions required. The adaptation of Greek and Celtic warfare techniques occurred gradually as Illyrian armies encountered foreign military systems through diplomatic contacts and direct combat experience. Greek influence appeared primarily in siege warfare capabilities, with Illyrian engineers learning to construct and operate torsion artillery engines capable of breaching fortified positions. Archaeological evidence from siege sites includes stone projectiles weighing up to 50 kilograms, indicating the deployment of substantial siege engines that required specialized technical knowledge to construct and maintain. Celtic military influences manifested in the adoption of longer swords and improved metallurgical techniques that produced superior blade quality. Illyrian smiths learned to create pattern-welded sword blades that combined different grades of iron and steel to achieve optimal combinations of flexibility and edge retention. These weapons, typically measuring 70 to 80 centimeters in length, proved particularly effective in the close quarters combat that characterized much of Illyrian warfare. Diplomatic relations with Macedonia under Philip II began as territorial disputes over border regions, but evolved into complex negotiations involving marriage alliances, territorial exchanges, and military cooperation agreements. Philip's expansion into Illyrian territories initially met fierce resistance from King Bardilis, who viewed Macedonian advances as direct threats to Illyrian independence and territorial integrity. The resulting conflicts, fought primarily in the mountainous regions along the Macedonian-Illyrian frontier, demonstrated both the military capabilities of the new Illyrian kingdoms and their limitations when confronting the disciplined phalanx formations that formed the core of Macedonian military power. The decisive engagement between Bardilis and Philip occurred in 358 BC near Lake Ohrid, where Macedonian tactical superiority ultimately prevailed despite fierce Illyrian resistance. Classical accounts describe a brutal battle in which Illyrian light infantry initially disrupted Macedonian formations through rapid flanking attacks, but ultimately could not withstand the sustained pressure of coordinated phalanx advances supported by Macedonian cavalry charges. Bardilis himself fell in the fighting, along with approximately 7,000 Illyrian warriors, marking the end of the first phase of Illyrian monarchical development. The aftermath of this defeat led to significant diplomatic realignments as surviving Illyrian kingdoms recognized the need for accommodation with Macedonian power. Philip's marriage to Audata, an Illyrian princess, symbolized the new relationship between the two powers while providing both sides with strategic advantages. The Macedonians gained valuable intelligence about Illyrian military capabilities and territorial organization, while Illyrian kingdoms secured protection against rival neighbors and access to Macedonian military expertise. Under Alexander the Great, Macedonian-Illyrian relations continued along similar lines, with Illyrian kingdoms providing auxiliary troops for Alexander's campaigns while maintaining internal autonomy. Illyrian light infantry served with distinction in Alexander's armies, particularly during the difficult mountain campaigns in Afghanistan and India, where their specialized skills proved invaluable. These military exchanges exposed Illyrian soldiers to advanced military techniques and organizational methods that they subsequently introduced to their homeland armies. The experience of serving in Alexander's campaigns fundamentally transformed Illyrian military thinking and political organization. Veterans returning from Eastern campaigns brought knowledge of advanced siege techniques, improved logistics systems, and exposure to the administrative methods used to govern vast territories. This knowledge proved crucial as Illyrian kingdoms expanded their own territorial control and developed more sophisticated governmental institutions. Roman influence in Illyrian affairs began gradually during the 4th century BC as Roman commercial interests expanded across the Adriatic Sea. Initial contacts occurred through Greek intermediaries, particularly the colonies at Apollonia and Epidamnos, which maintained commercial relationships with both Roman merchants and Illyrian kingdoms. These early interactions remained largely peaceful, focusing on trade agreements and diplomatic protocols rather than territorial disputes or military confrontations. The establishment of Roman trading posts along the Illyrian coast created new economic opportunities while introducing Illyrian leaders to Roman political and military practices. Roman merchants brought manufactured goods including fine pottery, metalwork and luxury items that appealed to Illyrian aristocratic tastes, while Illyrian territories provided raw materials, including metals, livestock, and agricultural products that Roman markets demanded. These commercial relationships gradually developed into more complex diplomatic arrangements, as both sides recognized the mutual benefits of stable, peaceful relations. Roman diplomatic practices differed significantly from those employed by Greek colonies or Macedonian kingdoms, emphasizing formal treaty arrangements and legal frameworks that defined specific rights and obligations for all parties. Illyrian kingdoms found these approaches attractive because they provided greater certainty in international relations, while offering protection against more aggressive neighbours. The gradual adoption of Roman diplomatic protocols helped Illyrian kingdoms develop more sophisticated international relations capabilities that served them well in later conflicts. The period between 350 and 250 BZ witnessed the full maturation of Illyrian monarchical institutions as kingdoms consolidated territorial control, developed professional military forces, and established diplomatic relationships with major Mediterranean powers. This transformation created the political foundations that would enable Illyrian kingdoms to play significant roles in the complex international relations of the Hellenistic period, while maintaining their distinctive cultural identity and territorial independence in the face of increasing external pressures from expanding Roman power. The consolidation of monarchical power across Illyrian territories reached its zenith under King Agron, who ascended to the Ardeian throne around 250 BC and immediately embarked on an ambitious program of naval expansion that would transform the Adriatic Sea into an Illyrian lake. Unlike his predecessors who had focused primarily on territorial consolidation and land-based military operations, Agron recognized that true regional dominance required mastery of maritime trade routes and the ability to project power across the entire Adriatic basin. Agron's naval strategy centered on the development of the Liburna, a distinctive warship design that had evolved from earlier Liburnian prototypes into a formidable instrument of naval warfare. These vessels, measuring approximately 30 meters in length with shallow drafts of less than 2 meters, could navigate in waters where larger Greek and Roman ships dared not venture. The Liburna featured a reinforced bronze ram at the waterline, designed to punch through enemy hulls below the waterline, while maintaining sufficient speed and maneuverability to escape retaliation from heavier vessels. The construction of Agron's war fleet required unprecedented organizational efforts and resource mobilization. Royal shipyards established at Skodra, Rhizon and other coastal centres employed hundreds of specialised craftsmen including ship carpenters, metal workers, sailmakers and rope manufacturers. Archaeological excavations at the Rhizon shipyard complex have revealed massive timber storage areas, bronze-working furnaces capable of producing large castings for ship fittings, and slipways designed to launch vessels directly into deep water channels. Each Liburna required approximately 50 carefully selected oak trees for its hull construction, with additional timber needed for oars, masts, and internal fittings. The royal administration established systematic forestry operations in the mountainous interior, where teams of woodcutters worked under military protection to harvest suitable trees and transport them to coastal shipyards via river systems. This logistical network required coordination between mountain communities, riverine transport specialists, and coastal construction crews, demonstrating the sophisticated administrative capabilities that Agron's kingdom had developed. The crews for these vessels came from coastal communities with generations of maritime experience, but Agron supplemented traditional sailors with trained warriors capable of both naval operations and amphibious assault tactics. Each Liburna carried between 100 and 120 men, including approximately 80 rowers who could also fight as marines when required. The remaining crew consisted of specialized naval warriors armed with javelins, short swords, and grappling equipment designed for boarding enemy vessels. Training for naval operations took place in protected bays along the Illyrian coast, where crews practiced coordinated maneuvers, ramming techniques, and boarding procedures. The shallow draft of Liburni allowed them to operate in coastal waters too dangerous for larger vessels, giving Illyrian crews intimate knowledge of every inlet, channel, and hidden anchorage along hundreds of kilometers of coastline. This geographical expertise proved crucial in later conflicts, as Illyrian fleets could disappear into coastal waters where pursuing enemies faced the constant threat of running aground on unmarked shoals. Agron's establishment of naval supremacy in the Adriatic fundamentally altered the economic and political dynamics of the entire region. Merchant vessels travelling between Italian ports and Greek colonies now required Illyrian permission to transit Adriatic waters, generating substantial revenues through transit fees and protective arrangements. The king's naval forces maintained permanent patrol stations at strategic points, including the Strait of Otranto, the approaches to major ports, and the channels between important islands. The systematic nature of Illyrian naval operations under Agron reflected sophisticated intelligence networks that tracked merchant shipping patterns, seasonal trade routes, and the movement of foreign naval forces. Coastal observation posts, often disguised as fishing villages or trading stations, provided regular reports on shipping activity to regional naval commanders who could deploy patrol squadrons to intercept valuable cargoes or collect transit fees from cooperative merchants. The death of Agron in 231 BC brought his widow Tutar to power as regent for their young son, marking a crucial transition in Illyrian political development. Tutar, described by contemporary sources as possessing both remarkable intelligence and fierce determination, inherited a naval force at the peak of its capabilities and a kingdom with unprecedented wealth and territorial control. However, she also faced mounting pressure from Roman commercial interests and Greek city-states, who viewed Illyrian maritime dominance as an intolerable threat to their economic prosperity. Tutar's regency coincided with expanding Roman commercial activities in the Adriatic, as Roman merchants sought to establish direct trading relationships with Greek colonies and exploit new markets in the eastern Mediterranean. These Roman commercial ventures inevitably conflicted with established Illyrian practices of controlling maritime trade through transit fees, protective arrangements, and selective piracy operations against vessels from hostile powers. The resulting tensions escalated rapidly, as both sides proved unwilling to compromise their fundamental economic interests. The expansion of Illyrian piracy operations under Tutar's direction represented a calculated response to perceived Roman encroachment on traditional Illyrian maritime territories. Rather than random raids conducted for immediate profit, these operations followed strategic objectives designed to demonstrate Illyrian naval capabilities while generating revenues necessary for continued fleet expansion. Tutar's naval commanders received detailed instructions regarding which vessels to target, what cargoes to prioritize, and how to treat captured crews to maximize both economic and psychological impact. Roman merchants found themselves particularly vulnerable to these operations because their vessels, designed for carrying maximum cargo loads rather than defensive operations, could neither outrun Illyrian Liburni nor effectively resist boarding attempts. The systematic nature of attacks on Roman shipping created a climate of fear that disrupted established trade routes and forced Roman merchants to seek alternative transportation arrangements or pay substantial fees for Illyrian protective services. Greek city-states along the Adriatic coast faced similar pressures as Illyrian naval forces expanded their operational areas to include previously secure coastal waters. The island of Issa, despite its theoretical independence, found its merchant vessels subject to Illyrian inspection and taxation, while the approaches to Apollonia and Epidamnos came under increasing Illyrian naval surveillance. These developments threatened the economic foundations of Greek colonial prosperity and forced colonial authorities to seek external assistance in maintaining their commercial independence. The political structure of the Ardeaean kingdom under Tutor's regency reflected the complex challenges of governing a maritime empire that encompassed diverse coastal communities, island populations, and inland territories with different economic foundations and cultural traditions. The royal administration had evolved far beyond the simple warrior aristocracy that had characterized earlier Illyrian political organization, developing specialized bureaucratic institutions capable of managing complex fiscal, military, and diplomatic responsibilities. The Royal Council, which advised the monarch on major policy decisions, included not only traditional warrior nobles, but also representatives from major merchant families, naval commanders with proven expertise in maritime operations, and administrators responsible for specific territorial regions. This expanded council structure reflected the reality that effective governance of the Ardeaean kingdom required expertise in commercial law, naval logistics, diplomatic protocol, and fiscal management rather than simply military prowess and aristocratic birth. Tribal assemblies continued to function in outlying regions where traditional clan structures remained strong, but their role had been substantially modified to accommodate the requirements of centralized royal administration. Local assemblies retained authority over internal community affairs, including land disputes, marriage arrangements, and religious ceremonies, but questions involving taxation, military service, and external relations fell under royal jurisdiction. This division of responsibilities allowed the monarchy to maintain effective central control while respecting traditional local autonomy in matters that did not affect kingdom-wide interests. The integration of conquered territories presented ongoing challenges that required flexible administrative approaches adapted to local conditions and cultural sensitivities. Coastal communities with established maritime traditions were typically incorporated into the kingdom through arrangements that preserved local leadership structures while requiring tribute payments and military service obligations. Island populations, particularly those with strategic value for naval operations, received special privileges including reduced taxation and guaranteed protection in exchange for providing naval bases and local intelligence. Inland territories captured through military conquest faced different integration procedures that emphasized the establishment of royal administrative centers and the appointment of royal governors responsible for tax collection, military recruitment, and the maintenance of public order. These governors, typically drawn from proven royal administrators rather than local nobility, established permanent garrisons at strategic locations and implemented standardized legal procedures that gradually replaced traditional tribal customs with royal law. The fiscal administration of Tutor's kingdom demonstrated remarkable sophistication in managing diverse revenue sources, including agricultural taxation, commercial transit fees, mining operations, and the proceeds from naval operations. Royal treasuries maintained detailed records of income and expenditures, with separate accounting systems for different categories of royal revenue. Archaeological evidence from administrative centres includes clay tablets recording tax assessments for individual communities, inventory lists for royal armories, and payroll records for professional military units. Commercial law under the Ardeaean monarchy evolved to accommodate the complex requirements of maritime trade while maintaining royal prerogatives over foreign commerce. Royal courts established standardized procedures for resolving disputes between merchants, determining liability for cargo losses, and enforcing contractual obligations across diverse legal traditions. These legal innovations proved attractive to foreign merchants who appreciated the predictability and enforceability of Illyrian commercial law compared to the often arbitrary practices they encountered in other Mediterranean ports. Cultural developments during this period reflected the increasing wealth and international connections of the Ardean kingdom, as royal patronage supported artistic and architectural projects that demonstrated both Illyrian cultural sophistication and the monarchy's capacity to command substantial resources. The influence of Hellenistic artistic traditions became increasingly evident in royal architectural projects, sculpture, and decorative arts, though these foreign influences were carefully adapted to maintain distinctively Illyrian cultural characteristics. The reconstruction of Skodra's royal quarter during Tutor's regency incorporated Hellenistic architectural principles, including the use of carefully proportioned columns, geometric decorative elements, and planned spatial relationships between different buildings. However, the overall design maintained traditional Illyrian emphasis on defensive capabilities and connection to natural landscape features. The new royal palace featured a great hall measuring 40 meters in length, with a timber roof supported by stone columns carved with distinctively Illyrian motifs, including stylized animal heads and geometric patterns derived from traditional metalwork designs. Urban planning in major Illyrian centers during this period demonstrated increasing sophistication in accommodating diverse functional requirements while maintaining defensive capabilities essential for political security. Ryazan, serving as the kingdom's primary naval base, underwent extensive reconstruction that included new harbour facilities capable of servicing the expanded royal fleet, residential quarters for naval personnel and their families, and commercial districts designed to handle the increased trade generated by the kingdom's maritime dominance. The harbour installations at Ryazan represented remarkable engineering achievements that required extensive knowledge of hydraulic principles and marine construction techniques. The main harbour featured stone-lined quays extending more than 200 metres into deep water, with carefully designed drainage systems that prevented siltation while accommodating seasonal variations in water levels. Shipyard facilities included covered construction areas that protected vessels under construction from weather damage, along with specialised workshops for producing naval equipment, including bronze fittings, sailcloth, and rope. Residential architecture in major urban centres reflected the increasing social stratification that accompanied the kingdom's expanding wealth and territorial control. Royal administrators, successful merchants, and naval commanders constructed elaborate houses featuring multiple rooms arranged around central courtyards, with sophisticated water supply systems and decorative elements that demonstrated their owners' prosperity and cultural sophistication. These residences typically included reception areas for conducting business, private quarters for family use, and service areas for domestic staff. The influence of Hellenistic artistic traditions appeared most clearly in sculptural works commissioned for royal and religious purposes. Stone carvers working in Illyrian centres learned to create realistic portrait sculptures and decorative reliefs that incorporated Greek technical methods while maintaining traditional Illyrian iconographic elements. Royal portrait sculptures from this period show clear Greek influence in their naturalistic treatment of human features, but retain distinctively Illyrian elements, including traditional royal regalia and symbolic associations with Illyrian deities. Religious architecture during Tutor's regency demonstrated the gradual synthesis of indigenous Illyrian traditions with Hellenistic architectural principles and decorative conventions. New temple construction at major urban centres featured Greek-influenced column systems and proportional relationships, but maintained traditional Illyrian orientation patterns and incorporated indigenous religious symbols into their decorative programs. The temple complex at Ryazan included a main sanctuary building constructed according to Greek architectural principles, surrounded by traditional Illyrian ritual spaces that preserved continuity with earlier religious practices. the growing tensions between Queen Tutor's Illyrian kingdom and Roman commercial interests reached a critical juncture in 230 BC, when a Roman embassy arrived at Scodra to demand compensation for attacks on Roman merchant vessels and guarantees of safe passage for future Roman shipping operations. The embassy, led by the brothers Gaius and Lucius Coruncanius, represented the first formal diplomatic contact between Rome and the Ardeaean kingdom, marking the beginning of a confrontation that would fundamentally reshape the political landscape of the Adriatic region. Roman motivations for intervention in Illyrian affairs extended far beyond simple protection of merchant shipping, though commercial considerations certainly played a significant role. The Roman Senate viewed Illyrian naval dominance in the Adriatic as a strategic threat to Roman expansion eastward, particularly given Rome's growing interest in Greek affairs and potential military operations across the Adriatic. The systematic nature of Illyrian piracy operations suggested a level of organisation and capability that could potentially threaten Roman military transport and communication lines during future eastern campaigns. Intelligence reports reaching Rome described Illyrian naval capabilities in terms that alarmed senators accustomed to Roman military superiority. The Illyrian fleet reportedly numbered over 200 Liburni, supported by numerous smaller vessels and maintaining permanent bases at strategic locations throughout the Adriatic. These forces operated under centralised command structures that could coordinate complex operations across vast maritime territories, demonstrating organisational sophistication that rivaled established Mediterranean naval powers. The Roman embassy's demands reflected both immediate commercial concerns and broader strategic objectives. Beyond compensation for specific attacks on Roman vessels, the Romans insisted that Tutor cease all piracy operations against Roman shipping, establish formal protocols for Roman merchant access to Illyrian ports, and provide guarantees that Illyrian naval forces would not interfere with Roman vessels travelling to Greek colonies. These demands effectively required Tutor to abandon the maritime policies that had generated much of her kingdom's wealth and strategic influence. Tutor's response to the Roman embassy demonstrated both her political acumen and her determination to maintain Illyrian independence in the face of Roman pressure. Rather than rejecting Roman demands outright, she offered limited concessions that addressed some Roman concerns, while preserving essential elements of Illyrian maritime policy. She agreed to investigate specific incidents involving Roman vessels and provide compensation where Illyrian responsibility could be proven, but refused to accept blanket restrictions on Illyrian naval operations in waters she considered part of her kingdom's territorial domain. The negotiations revealed fundamental differences in how Romans and Illyrians conceived of maritime sovereignty and commercial rights. Roman legal traditions emphasized the principle of freedom of navigation for all peaceful vessels, while Illyrian practices treated the Adriatic as territorial waters subject to royal authority and taxation. These conflicting legal frameworks made compromise extremely difficult, as concessions by either side would require abandoning fundamental principles of their respective political systems. The breakdown of diplomatic negotiations occurred when one of the Roman ambassadors, Lucius Coruncanius, was killed during a confrontation with Illyrian officials at Issa. Contemporary accounts provide conflicting versions of this incident, with Roman sources claiming that Coruncanius was murdered on Tutor's direct orders, while Illyrian traditions suggest that he died during a riot that erupted when local populations learned of Roman demands for unrestricted access to their territories. Regardless of the specific circumstances, Coruncanius's death provided Rome with a clear casus belli that justified military intervention. Roman preparations for war against the Illyrian kingdom reflected careful strategic planning and substantial resource mobilization. The Senate authorized the construction of a fleet specifically designed for Adriatic operations, including 200 kinkerems and numerous smaller vessels adapted for coastal warfare. These ships incorporated design modifications based on intelligence about Illyrian naval tactics, including reinforced hulls to resist ramming attacks and improve boarding defences to counter Illyrian marine assault techniques. The Roman expeditionary force assembled for the Illyrian campaign numbered approximately 22,000 infantry and 2,000 cavalry, supported by allied contingents from Greek cities and other Mediterranean partners. Command of the expedition was assigned to the consuls Gnaeus Fulvius, Centumalus, and Aulus Postumius Albinus, both experienced military commanders with proven capabilities in complex amphibious operations. The scale of this force demonstrated Roman determination to achieve decisive victory, rather than merely punish specific Illyrian actions. Roman military planning for the Illyrian campaign emphasized the capture of key strategic positions that would cripple Illyrian naval capabilities while establishing Roman control over crucial maritime routes. Primary objectives included the capture of Corcyra, which controlled the southern approaches to the Adriatic, and the reduction of major Illyrian naval bases including Apollonia and Epidamnos. Secondary objectives involved the neutralization of Illyrian island strongholds and the establishment of Roman naval stations at strategic locations. The campaign opened in 229 BC with a coordinated Roman assault on Corcyra, where Illyrian forces under the command of Demetrius of Pharos had established a substantial garrison. The island's strategic importance derived from its position controlling the Strait of Otranto, the narrow passage between the Adriatic and Ionian seas through which all maritime traffic between Italy and Greece had to pass. Illyrian control of Corcyra effectively gave them the ability to interdict Roman communications with Greek allies and potential military operations in the eastern Mediterranean. Roman siege operations at Corcyra demonstrated the tactical advantages of their superior numbers and siege engineering capabilities. The Roman fleet established a complete blockade of the island, while land forces systematically reduced Illyrian defensive positions using advanced siege techniques, including battering rams, siege towers, and torsion artillery. The Illyrian garrison, numbering approximately 3,000 men, fought with characteristic determination, but lacked the resources to sustain prolonged resistance against overwhelming Roman superiority. Demetrius of Pharos, recognizing the hopelessness of his position, negotiated a surrender agreement that preserved the lives of his garrison in exchange for transferring control of Corcyra to Roman forces. This pragmatic decision reflected his understanding that continued resistance would accomplish nothing beyond unnecessary casualties, while cooperation with Rome might preserve his political position and territorial holdings. The surrender of Corcyra provided Rome with its first major strategic victory and established a crucial base for subsequent operations against Illyrian strongholds. The Roman advance up the Adriatic coast proceeded systematically as Roman commanders sought to eliminate Illyrian naval bases while avoiding the kind of costly siege operations that might bog down their forces in prolonged static warfare. At Apollonia, the Roman approach prompted immediate negotiations as the Greek population recognized that resistance would be futile and potentially catastrophic for their commercial interests. The city's leaders agreed to expel the Illyrian garrison and accept Roman protection in exchange for guarantees of continued autonomy and commercial privileges. Similar negotiations at Epidamnos resulted in another bloodless Roman victory, as local authorities calculated that accommodation with Rome offered better prospects for future prosperity than continued association with the declining Illyrian kingdom. The rapid collapse of Illyrian positions along the coast reflected both Roman military superiority and the pragmatic recognition by Greek colonial populations that their economic interests lay with the emerging Roman power rather than with traditional Illyrian overlords. Tutor's response to these military disasters demonstrated both her strategic understanding and her determination to preserve what remained of her kingdom's independence. Rather than attempting to defend every position against overwhelming Roman advantages, she ordered the evacuation of exposed coastal bases and concentrated her remaining forces at Ryazan and Skodra, where mountainous terrain and strong fortifications offered better prospects for sustained resistance. This strategic withdrawal preserved the core of Illyrian military capability while forcing Romans to undertake difficult siege operations in challenging terrain. The siege of Ryazan presented Roman commanders with their first serious tactical challenge of the campaign. The city's position on a narrow peninsula surrounded by steep mountains made conventional siege approaches extremely difficult, while Illyrian naval forces retained sufficient capability to maintain limited supply lines to the besieged garrison. Roman siege engineers were forced to construct elaborate approach works that snaked up mountainous terrain while maintaining protection against Illyrian sorties and missile attacks from elevated positions. Roman siege operations at Ryazan required approximately 3 months of sustained effort before Illyrian resistance finally collapsed. The prolonged nature of this siege demonstrated both the defensive advantages of well-chosen Illyrian positions and the determination of Illyrian forces to resist Roman conquest. Archaeological evidence from the siege includes Roman siege works, Illyrian defensive modifications, and evidence of the intense combat that characterized the final assault on the city's walls. The fall of Ryazan eliminated the primary base for Illyrian naval operations and effectively ended organized resistance to Roman conquest. Tutor, recognizing that further resistance would only result in additional casualties without achieving meaningful military objectives, opened negotiations for a comprehensive peace settlement that would preserve her dynasty while acknowledging Roman supremacy in the Adriatic region. These negotiations reflected her understanding that political survival required accommodation with Roman power rather than futile continued resistance. The Treaty of 228 BC established the framework for Roman-Illyrian relations that would persist for the next decade. Under its terms, Tutor retained control over a substantially reduced territory centred on Skodra and the immediate surrounding region, while acknowledging Roman authority over former Illyrian coastal possessions and island territories. The treaty specifically prohibited Illyrian naval operations beyond the Lissus River and required annual tribute payments to Rome as acknowledgement of Roman supremacy. Roman establishment of protectorates over former Illyrian territories represented a significant innovation in Roman imperial administration. Rather than annexing conquered territories directly, Rome established client relationships with local communities that preserved nominal independence, while ensuring Roman control over strategic resources and military capabilities. Greek cities including Apollonia and Epidamnos became Roman allies with guaranteed autonomy in internal affairs, while maintaining obligations to provide military support for Roman operations and exclude hostile forces from their territories. The island of Corcyra received special status as a Roman naval base, with Roman forces maintaining permanent garrisons while local populations retained control over civilian administration and commercial activities. This arrangement provided Rome with crucial strategic control over Adriatic maritime routes, while minimizing the administrative burden of direct territorial governance. Similar arrangements with other strategic islands created a network of Roman bases that effectively controlled all major Adriatic shipping lanes. Demetrius of Pharos emerged as the primary beneficiary of Roman reorganization, receiving substantial territorial grants in recognition of his cooperation during the Roman conquest. His new domains included much of the central Dalmatian coast and numerous islands, making him one of the most powerful rulers in the post-war Adriatic region. Roman support for Demetrius reflected their preference for governing through reliable local clients, rather than establishing direct Roman administration over every conquered territory. The administrative boundaries established by Roman reorganization created new political realities that would profoundly influence subsequent Illyrian development. Traditional tribal territories were divided among different administrative units, disrupting established social and economic relationships while creating new opportunities for communities that successfully adapted to Roman requirements. Coastal regions with strategic value received preferential treatment and enhanced autonomy, while interior territories faced more restrictive oversight and heavier tribute obligations. Roman success in the First Illyrian War demonstrated the effectiveness of coordinated naval and land operations in achieving strategic objectives while minimizing casualties and campaign duration. The systematic approach to reducing Illyrian strongholds, combined with skillful diplomacy that separated potential allies from committed enemies, provided a model for subsequent Roman expansion in the eastern Mediterranean. The establishment of client relationships rather than direct annexation proved particularly successful in maintaining Roman control while reducing administrative costs and local resistance to Roman authority. The transformation of Illyrian territories following the Roman conquest of 228 BC marked the beginning of one of the most profound cultural and administrative metamorphoses in ancient European history. The establishment of Roman control over the eastern Adriatic coast initiated systematic changes that would gradually reshape every aspect of Illyrian society, from legal frameworks and urban planning to religious practices and linguistic traditions. This process, known as Romanization, occurred not through sudden imposition but through the gradual integration of Roman administrative practices, legal systems, and cultural norms into existing Illyrian structures. The initial phase of Roman administrative organization focused on establishing effective control over strategic territories while minimizing resistance from local populations. Roman administrators recognized that successful governance of the diverse Illyrian territories required flexible approaches that respected local traditions while ensuring Roman strategic objectives. The creation of the province of Illyricum around 168 BC represented the culmination of decades of gradual administrative development, incorporating lessons learned from earlier experiments with client kingdoms and protectorate arrangements. The boundaries of Illyricum encompassed a vast territory stretching from the Arsia River in Istria southward to the Drin River in Albania, including most of the Adriatic islands, and extending inland to include the Dinaric mountain ranges and their associated river valleys. This enormous province, covering approximately 55,000 square kilometres, presented unprecedented administrative challenges due to its diverse topography, scattered populations, and complex tribal structures that had evolved over centuries of independent development. Roman provincial administration adapted traditional Roman governmental structures to accommodate the unique requirements of governing Illyrian populations. The provincial governor, typically holding praetorian rank, established his headquarters at Salona, strategically positioned to control both coastal shipping routes and inland communication networks. The choice of Salona reflected careful consideration of geographic factors including harbour facilities, defensive positioning, and accessibility to major population centres throughout the province. The governor's administrative staff included specialists in military affairs, fiscal management, legal administration, and engineering projects, reflecting the complex requirements of governing a territory that combined strategic military importance with substantial economic potential. Roman administrative practices emphasized systematic record-keeping, standardized procedures, and hierarchical chains of command that could coordinate activities across vast distances and diverse populations. Clay tablets and papyrus documents recovered from administrative centres provide detailed insights into the sophisticated bureaucratic systems that Roman officials developed to manage provincial affairs. Municipal organisation within the province followed Roman models while accommodating existing Illyrian settlement patterns and social structures. Existing urban centres including Iadaea, Nerona and Lissus received municipal status with standardised governmental institutions, including elected magistrates, town councils, and public works departments. These municipalities operated according to Roman legal frameworks while maintaining sufficient autonomy to address local concerns and cultural preferences. The establishment of Roman colonies represented a more intensive form of administrative integration, involving the settlement of Roman citizens and veterans in strategically important locations. Colonia Julia Ieda, founded around 59 BC, exemplified this approach with its systematic urban planning, Roman architectural standards, and population drawn primarily from Italian settlers. The colony's layout followed standard Roman planning principles with a central forum, perpendicular street grid, and designated areas for residential, commercial, and religious activities. The process of Romanization in Illyrian territories occurred gradually through multiple interconnected mechanisms that transformed local societies without completely eliminating indigenous cultural elements. Language adoption represented one of the most visible aspects of this transformation, as Latin gradually became the primary language of administration, commerce, and education throughout the province. However, this linguistic transition occurred over several generations, with indigenous Illyrian languages persisting in rural areas and domestic contexts well into the imperial period. Archaeological evidence from urban centres reveals the gradual adoption of Latin inscriptions on public buildings, tombstones, and commercial establishments. Early inscriptions often display mixed linguistic elements, combining Latin administrative terminology with Illyrian personal names and local place names. This transitional period, lasting approximately 150 years, demonstrates the complex negotiation between Roman administrative requirements and local cultural continuity that characterized successful Romanization processes. Educational institutions played crucial roles in facilitating language adoption and cultural transformation. Roman schools established in major urban centres provided instruction in Latin language, literature, and rhetoric for the children of local elites, creating a generation of Illyrian leaders capable of functioning effectively within Roman administrative and commercial systems. These educational opportunities proved attractive to ambitious Illyrian families who recognised that Roman cultural competency offered pathways to political advancement and economic prosperity. Legal system integration proceeded through the gradual replacement of traditional Illyrian customary law with Roman legal frameworks and procedures. Roman courts established in provincial capitals applied Roman civil law to disputes involving Roman citizens, while initially allowing indigenous legal traditions to govern relationships between Illyrian community members. Over time, the advantages of Roman legal procedures, including standardized evidence requirements, appellate processes, and enforcement mechanisms, encouraged voluntary adoption of Roman law even in cases where traditional alternatives remained available. The transformation of property law represented a particularly significant aspect of legal integration. Roman concepts of individual property ownership contrasted sharply with traditional Illyrian practices that emphasized communal land tenure and clan-based resource management. Roman administrators introduced systematic land surveys, individual title registration, and standardized property transfer procedures that gradually replaced customary arrangements. This transformation facilitated Roman-style agricultural development while creating new opportunities for individual economic advancement. Commercial law integration occurred more rapidly than other legal changes due to the immediate practical advantages of standardized procedures for conducting business across cultural boundaries. Roman commercial courts provided reliable mechanisms for enforcing contracts, resolving disputes, and collecting debts in transactions involving parties from different cultural backgrounds. Illyrian merchants quickly recognized that Roman commercial law offered superior protection for their investments and more predictable outcomes for business disputes. Social structure transformation represented one of the most complex aspects of Romanization, as Roman administrative practices gradually modified traditional Illyrian clan-based hierarchies while creating new opportunities for social mobility. The Roman concept of citizenship, initially limited to Italian settlers and selected local elites, gradually expanded to include broader segments of the Illyrian population who demonstrated loyalty to Roman authority and competency in Roman cultural practices. Roman military service provided one of the most important pathways for Illyrian social advancement and cultural integration. Illyrian recruits serving in Roman auxiliary units received intensive training in Roman military procedures, Latin language skills, and exposure to Roman cultural values. Veterans returning to their home communities after completing military service brought Roman organizational methods, technical skills, and cultural perspectives that facilitated broader social transformation. The auxiliary units recruited from Illyrian populations became renowned throughout the Roman world for their effectiveness in difficult terrain and challenging combat conditions. The cohors delmatorum and similar units served with distinction in campaigns from Britain to Syria, earning recognition for their discipline, endurance, and tactical flexibility. These military experiences exposed Illyrian soldiers to the full scope of Roman civilization while providing them with valuable skills and connections that enhanced their post-service careers. Urban development throughout the province reflected the systematic application of Roman planning principles and construction techniques to create functional, defensible, and aesthetically impressive urban centres. The reconstruction of Salona during the 1st century BC exemplified this approach, with massive public works projects that transformed a modest Illyrian settlement into a major Roman administrative centre, capable of supporting a population exceeding 60,000 residents. The Forum complex at Salona occupied a central position within the city's grid layout, featuring a rectangular plaza measuring 45 by 90 metres, surrounded by colonnaded porticos that provided weather protection for commercial and administrative activities. The basilica, constructed along the Forum's northern edge, served multiple functions, including law courts, commercial exchanges, and public meetings. Its interior featured a central nave flanked by side aisles, with clerestory windows providing natural lighting for legal proceedings and business transactions. Infrastructure development represented a crucial component of Roman urbanization efforts, with massive investments in water supply systems, sewage networks, and transportation facilities that dramatically improved living conditions while demonstrating Roman engineering capabilities. The aqueduct system serving Salona drew water from mountain springs located more than 20 kilometres from the city, requiring sophisticated engineering to maintain proper gradients across challenging terrain while providing sufficient flow to meet urban demands. The aqueduct's construction involved cutting through solid rock formations, building stone bridges across valleys, and creating distribution networks that supplied water to public fountains, bath complexes, and private residences throughout the city. Archaeological investigations have revealed the sophisticated valve systems, settling tanks, and maintenance tunnels that Roman engineers incorporated into the design to ensure reliable operation and facilitate repairs. Road construction throughout the province followed Roman engineering standards that prioritized durability, all-weather accessibility, and efficient movement of military forces and commercial traffic. The Via Dalmatica, connecting Aquileia with Dyrrhachium, represented one of the most ambitious engineering projects undertaken in the province, requiring the construction of bridges, tunnels, and mountain passes that remained in use for centuries after the fall of Roman authority. Road construction techniques employed in Illyrian territories adapted standard Roman methods to local conditions and available materials. Foundation layers typically consisted of large stones, carefully fitted together, covered by successive layers of smaller stones, gravel, and finally paved surfaces using local limestone cut into standardized blocks. The resulting roads could support heavy military traffic while providing reliable transportation for commercial goods and civilian travelers. Amphitheatre construction in major urban centres demonstrated both Roman commitment to providing traditional entertainment facilities and the adaptation of standard architectural forms to local conditions and preferences. The amphitheatre at Pula, constructed during the 1st century AD, featured a sophisticated design that accommodated approximately 23,000 spectators while incorporating advanced structural engineering that allowed the building to be constructed on sloping terrain without compromising safety or visibility. The arena's underground chambers housed complex mechanical systems for raising wild animals, stage props, and gladiators to arena level during performances. These facilities required sophisticated engineering knowledge and substantial financial investment, demonstrating the prosperity that Roman administration had brought to Illyrian urban centres. The amphitheatre's construction also required coordination between skilled architects, experienced construction crews, and local suppliers of building materials, fostering economic development throughout the region. Religious syncretism emerged as one of the most fascinating aspects of cultural transformation in Roman Illyria, as traditional Illyrian deities gradually merged with Roman religious practices while maintaining distinctive local characteristics. Archaeological evidence from religious sites reveals the gradual adoption of Roman architectural forms for temple construction while preserving indigenous ritual practices and mythological traditions. The temple complex at Doclea exemplified this syncretic approach, featuring a main temple constructed according to Roman architectural principles, but dedicated to a deity that combined attributes of the Roman Diana with traditional Illyrian goddess figures associated with hunting and mountain protection. Votive offerings recovered from the site include both Roman-style bronze figurines and traditional Illyrian stone carvings, indicating the coexistence of different religious traditions within the same sacred space. Mystery cults gained popularity throughout the province during the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, offering spiritual experiences that appealed to populations seeking personal religious fulfillment beyond traditional civic religious obligations. The cult of Mithras proved particularly popular among military personnel stationed in Illyrian garrisons, with Mithraea discovered at military sites including Tellurium and Burnham, featuring elaborate underground chambers designed for initiation ceremonies and ritual meals. Early Christianity entered Illyrian territories through commercial networks and military connections, initially establishing small communities in major urban centres before gradually spreading to rural areas. The martyrdom of Saint Domnius at Salona around 304 AD marked a significant moment in the province's Christian development, as his persecution under Diocletian's anti-Christian edicts demonstrated both the growing influence of Christian communities and the continuing tensions between traditional Roman religious practices and emerging Christian beliefs. Christian communities in Illyrian territories developed distinctive characteristics that reflected both Roman administrative influences and indigenous cultural traditions. Early Christian architecture in the province incorporated Roman construction techniques while adapting basilica designs to accommodate Christian liturgical requirements. The basilica complex at Salona, constructed during the 4th century AD, featured a sophisticated layout that included separate spaces for different aspects of Christian worship, while maintaining architectural continuity with traditional Roman public buildings. The gradual integration of Illyrian populations into the Roman imperial system during the 1st through 3rd centuries AD represented one of the most successful examples of provincial assimilation in Roman history. Unlike the violent conquest that characterized earlier Roman expansion, this period witnessed the systematic transformation of former enemies into some of Rome's most loyal and capable subjects. The process occurred through carefully orchestrated policies that recognized Illyrian military potential, while providing pathways for social advancement and economic prosperity within the imperial framework. Roman military recruitment in Illyrian territories began almost immediately after the establishment of provincial administration, as Roman commanders recognized the exceptional fighting qualities that Illyrian warriors had demonstrated during the conquest period. The mountainous terrain and harsh climate of the Dinaric Alps had produced populations with extraordinary physical endurance, intimate knowledge of difficult terrain, and cultural traditions that emphasized martial excellence. These characteristics made Illyrian recruits ideally suited for auxiliary service in Roman armies operating in similarly challenging environments throughout the empire. The recruitment process operated through a combination of voluntary enlistment and selective conscription that targeted young men from communities with proven military traditions. Roman recruiting officers established permanent stations in major population centres, including Salona, Narona and Skodra, where they maintained detailed records of eligible candidates and coordinated with local authorities to identify suitable recruits. The process emphasized physical fitness, basic literacy skills, and demonstrated loyalty to Roman authority, with preference given to candidates from families with existing military connections. Training for Illyrian auxiliary units took place at specialized camps designed to transform tribal warriors into disciplined Roman soldiers while preserving their distinctive combat capabilities. The primary training facility at Tellurium, located in the Cetina River Valley, could accommodate approximately 5,000 recruits simultaneously in barracks complexes that provided both military instruction and cultural orientation. The curriculum included intensive Latin language instruction, Roman military drill procedures, weapons training with standardized Roman equipment, and instruction in Roman military law and customs. The transformation of traditional Illyrian fighting methods into Roman auxiliary tactics required careful adaptation that preserved indigenous strengths while incorporating Roman organizational principles. Illyrian light infantry techniques, particularly their expertise in mountain warfare and rapid movement across difficult terrain, proved invaluable for Roman armies operating in frontier regions where traditional heavy infantry formations proved less effective. Roman military instructors developed specialized training programs that enhanced these natural abilities while teaching Roman tactical coordination and command structures. Auxiliary units recruited from Illyrian populations typically served 25-year enlistments that took them far from their homeland territories to garrison duties throughout the Roman Empire. The cohors prima delmatorum served with distinction in Britain, where their mountain warfare skills proved crucial during campaigns in Wales and Scotland. Archaeological evidence from Hadrian's Wall includes inscriptions recording the service of Illyrian auxiliary units, along with distinctive equipment and personal items that demonstrate the cultural connections these soldiers maintained with their homeland despite decades of foreign service. The reputation of Illyrian auxiliary forces spread throughout the Roman military establishment, leading to preferential recruitment policies that actively sought Illyrian soldiers for challenging assignments. The cohors Brucerum gained renown for their service along the Rhine frontier, where their expertise in river-crossing operations and forest warfare proved invaluable during Germanic campaigns. Similar units served in Dacia, Pannonia, and other frontier provinces where their specialized skills and proven reliability made them indispensable components of Roman military strategy. Military service provided Illyrian soldiers with unprecedented opportunities for social advancement and cultural integration within the broader Roman world. Veterans returning to their home communities after completing their service brought substantial savings accumulated during their military careers, along with Roman citizenship rights that extended to their families. These veterans often became local leaders and successful merchants, using their military connections and Roman legal status to establish prosperous businesses and advance their social positions. The economic prosperity that characterized Illyrian territories during the Pax Romana period reflected both the natural resources of the region and the systematic development policies implemented by Roman administrators. The province's location along major trade routes connecting Italy with the Balkans and Eastern Mediterranean provided substantial opportunities for commercial development, while Roman investment in infrastructure and urban development created conditions conducive to sustained economic growth. Agricultural development throughout the province benefited from Roman engineering expertise and systematic land management practices that dramatically increased productivity while ensuring sustainable resource utilization. The fertile river valleys of the Neretva, Cetina, and Krka rivers underwent extensive development during this period, with Roman engineers constructing irrigation systems, drainage networks, and flood control measures that transformed previously marginal lands into highly productive agricultural areas. The introduction of Roman agricultural techniques and crop varieties revolutionized farming practices throughout Illyrian territories. Roman agricultural specialists introduced improved ploughing methods, crop rotation systems, and selective breeding programs that increased yields while reducing labor requirements. Olive cultivation, previously limited to coastal areas, expanded into interior valleys where Roman engineers created terraced growing areas protected from harsh mountain winds. Similarly, viticulture spread throughout regions with suitable soil and climate conditions, establishing wine production as a major economic activity. Mining operations represented another crucial component of the province's economic development, as Roman engineers applied advanced extraction techniques to exploit the region's substantial mineral resources. The silver mines at Demavia produced high-quality ore that supplied Roman mints throughout the empire, while iron mining operations in Bosnia and Montenegro provided raw materials for weapons production and construction projects. Lead mining in the Drina River Valley supplied material for water pipes, construction applications, and other industrial uses throughout the Roman world. Roman mining techniques employed in Illyrian territories demonstrated remarkable engineering sophistication, with extensive underground tunnel systems, sophisticated drainage networks, and mechanical lifting devices that allowed extraction from previously inaccessible deposits. The mining complex at Domavia featured underground workings extending more than 300 meters below surface level, supported by timber frameworks and connected by carefully engineered ventilation shafts that provided fresh air for workers operating in dangerous conditions. The growth of trade cities throughout the province reflected both increased commercial activity and systematic urban development policies that created attractive conditions for merchants and craftsmen. Salona emerged as the province's primary commercial centre, with harbour facilities capable of accommodating the largest merchant vessels operating in the Adriatic. The city's commercial district featured covered markets, warehouse complexes, and specialised facilities for different types of merchandise, including grain storage, wine cellars, and metal working shops. Salona's population during the 2nd century AD exceeded 60,000 residents, making it one of the largest cities in the Roman Balkans. The city's prosperity attracted merchants from throughout the Mediterranean, creating a cosmopolitan atmosphere that facilitated cultural exchange and technological innovation. Archaeological excavations have revealed evidence of specialised craft production, including glassmaking, ceramic production, metalworking, and textile manufacturing that supplied both local markets and export trade throughout the Roman world. Siscia, strategically positioned at the confluence of the Sava and Kupa rivers, developed into a major inland commercial centre that controlled trade routes connecting the Adriatic coast with Pannonia and the Danube frontier. The city's location provided access to river transportation networks that allowed efficient movement of bulk commodities including grain, timber, and metal products. Roman engineers constructed extensive port facilities along both rivers, with stone-lined quays, warehouse complexes, and specialised loading equipment that facilitated rapid cargo transfer between different transportation modes. The development of Siscia as a major mint facility demonstrated the city's economic importance and the Roman government's confidence in the region's stability and prosperity. The mint produced coins for circulation throughout the Illyrian provinces and neighbouring regions, with production levels that required substantial supplies of precious metals and skilled craftsmen. Archaeological evidence from the mint complex includes sophisticated furnaces, precision weighing equipment, and die-cutting tools that demonstrate the advanced metallurgical techniques employed in Roman coin production. The rise of Illyrian elites within Roman society represented one of the most remarkable aspects of the province's integration into the imperial system. Unlike many other provincial populations who remained largely excluded from positions of authority within the Roman hierarchy, Illyrians achieved unprecedented success in military, political and administrative careers that took them to the highest levels of Roman society. The military careers of Illyrian officers reflected both their exceptional capabilities and Roman recognition of their potential for leadership positions. Marcus Valerius Maximianus, born in Sirmium to an Illyrian family, rose through the ranks to command legions in multiple provinces before achieving senatorial rank and serving as provincial governor in Africa. His career demonstrated the possibilities available to talented individuals from Illyrian backgrounds who successfully navigated Roman military and political institutions. Illyrian senators became increasingly prominent in Roman political life during the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, with several achieving consulships and other high magistracies. Their success reflected both individual merit and the growing recognition of Illyrian territories as integral components of the Roman Empire rather than merely conquered provinces. These senators typically maintained strong connections to their homeland regions, using their political influence to secure beneficial policies and development projects for Illyrian communities. The administrative careers of Illyrian officials demonstrated their capacity for effective governance and their understanding of Roman institutional practices. Gaius Iulius Proculus, from a prominent Salona family, served as procurator in multiple provinces before achieving equestrian rank and appointment to high-level financial positions within the imperial administration. His career illustrated the pathways available for ambitious Illyrians who combined local connections with Roman administrative expertise. Military commanders of Illyrian origin achieved particular distinction during the crisis of the 3rd century, when their leadership capabilities and understanding of frontier warfare proved crucial for imperial survival. The Emperor Claudius Gothicus, born in Dardania, demonstrated the military excellence that characterized Illyrian leadership during this challenging period. His victories against Gothic invasions and his administrative reforms helped stabilize the empire during one of its most difficult periods. Cultural achievements during this period reflected the synthesis of Roman and indigenous Illyrian traditions that created distinctive artistic and intellectual expressions. Architectural monuments throughout the province demonstrated sophisticated understanding of Roman construction techniques, while incorporating decorative elements and spatial arrangements that reflected local preferences and cultural values. The palace complex constructed at Split by Emperor Diocletian represented the culmination of Romano-Illyrian architectural development, combining imperial Roman grandeur with practical adaptations to local climate and defensive requirements. The complex measured approximately 215 by 180 metres, enclosed by walls reaching heights of 20 metres in some sections. The internal layout featured a sophisticated combination of residential quarters, administrative offices, religious spaces, and defensive installations that reflected both imperial requirements and regional architectural traditions. Diocletian's palace incorporated advanced engineering techniques, including sophisticated heating systems, water supply networks, and sewage disposal arrangements that demonstrated Roman technological capabilities while adapting to local conditions. The peristyle courtyard, measuring 35 by 13 metres, featured elaborate columns and decorative elements that combined classical Roman proportions with distinctive regional stonework techniques. The integration of the palace with the existing urban fabric of Split created a unique architectural ensemble that influenced subsequent development throughout the region. Literary production in Roman Illyria reflected the educational achievements of local populations and their engagement with broader Roman intellectual traditions. Writers from Illyrian backgrounds contributed to various genres, including historical works, poetry, and technical treatises that demonstrated both classical learning and distinctive regional perspectives. These works typically combined Roman literary conventions with local historical traditions and cultural references that preserved indigenous knowledge while making it accessible to broader Roman audiences. The historical works of Illyrian authors provided valuable perspectives on regional development and the integration process that transformed their territories from independent kingdoms into Roman provinces. These writers typically emphasized the positive aspects of Roman rule while maintaining pride in their indigenous heritage and cultural achievements. Their works served important functions in explaining Illyrian experiences to Roman readers while helping local populations understand their place within the broader imperial system. Artistic production throughout the province demonstrated remarkable creativity in combining Roman techniques with indigenous decorative traditions and symbolic systems. Sculptural works from this period show clear Roman influence in their realistic portrayal of human figures and attention to anatomical detail, while incorporating traditional Illyrian motifs and symbolic elements that maintained connections to local cultural traditions. Mosaic art achieved particular distinction in Roman Illyria, with workshops in Salona and other major centres producing sophisticated works that decorated public buildings, private residences, and religious installations throughout the province. These mosaics typically featured geometric patterns, mythological scenes, and naturalistic representations that demonstrated both technical excellence and creative adaptation of Roman artistic conventions to local preferences and available materials. The collapse of central Roman authority during the crisis of the 3rd century created unprecedented opportunities for military commanders from the provinces to seize imperial power, and nowhere was this phenomenon more pronounced than among the officer class that had emerged from the Illyrian territories. The systematic breakdown of traditional Roman political institutions between 235 and 284 AD witnessed the rise of numerous soldier emperors, many of whom traced their origins to the rugged mountains and coastal plains that had produced Rome's most effective military leaders for over 2 centuries. Gaius Messius Quintus Decius, born around 201 AD in the village of Budalia near Sirmium, exemplified the new breed of imperial candidates who combined provincial origins with exceptional military capabilities and deep understanding of frontier warfare. His family belonged to the emerging Illyrian aristocracy that had prospered under Roman rule, with extensive landholdings in the fertile Sava River Valley and connections to the military establishment through multiple generations of service in auxiliary units and provincial administration. Decius received his early education in Sirmium before pursuing advanced studies in Rome, where he acquired the legal and administrative knowledge necessary for high-level governmental positions. The military career that would eventually carry Decius to imperial power began with service as a junior officer in Danubian legions, where he gained first-hand experience with the Gothic invasions that increasingly threatened the empire's northern frontiers. His promotion through the ranks reflected both personal merit and the systematic advancement opportunities available to capable officers from Illyrian backgrounds. By 235 AD, he had achieved senatorial rank and commanded substantial military forces along the Danube, where his intimate knowledge of local terrain and tribal politics proved invaluable for maintaining frontier security. Decius's rise to imperial power occurred during the chaotic aftermath of Philip the Arab's death in 249 AD, when competing military factions struggled for control of the empire while barbarian invasions intensified along multiple frontiers. The Danubian legions proclaimed Decius emperor at Verona, recognizing his proven military capabilities and his potential for restoring stability to the increasingly fragmented imperial system. His acceptance of imperial authority reflected both personal ambition and genuine concern for the empire's survival during its most challenging period. The administrative and military reforms implemented during Decius's brief reign demonstrated the practical approach to governance that characterized Illyrian imperial leadership. Rather than pursuing grandiose building projects or expensive ceremonial displays, he focused resources on strengthening frontier defences improving military logistics, and addressing the economic disruptions that had undermined imperial stability. His establishment of systematic procedures for military recruitment, equipment standardization, and command coordination provided models that subsequent Illyrian emperors would refine and expand. Decius's persecution of Christians represented one of the most controversial aspects of his reign, reflecting his belief that traditional Roman religious practices were essential for maintaining imperial unity and divine favour during the crisis period. The systematic nature of these persecutions, extending throughout the empire rather than targeting specific regions or communities, demonstrated the administrative capabilities that Illyrian leaders had developed through their provincial experiences. Archaeological evidence from persecution sites reveals the thoroughness with which imperial orders were implemented, indicating effective communication networks and reliable command structures. The Gothic invasions that ultimately claimed Decius's life at the Battle of Abritus in 251 AD highlighted both the military challenges facing the empire and the personal courage that characterized Illyrian military leadership. Contemporary accounts describe Decius leading cavalry charges against Gothic formations despite being outnumbered and operating in unfamiliar terrain. His death alongside his son Herennius Etruscus marked the end of one of the most capable administrations of the crisis period, while demonstrating the personal risks that imperial commanders faced during this turbulent era. Marcus Aurelius Claudius, known to history as Claudius Gothicus, emerged from similar Illyrian backgrounds to achieve even greater military success against the barbarian invasions that threatened to overwhelm Roman defences. Born around 214 AD in Dardania, he represented the generation of Illyrian officers who had grown up during the early phases of the 3rd century crisis and understood both the military challenges and administrative requirements necessary for imperial survival. His family's military traditions extended back to the earliest phases of Roman recruitment in Illyrian territories, providing him with deep connections to the professional soldier class that increasingly dominated imperial politics. The military innovations developed under Claudius Gothicus reflected systematic analysis of barbarian tactical methods and careful adaptation of Roman military doctrine to address new strategic challenges. His reorganization of cavalry units emphasized mobility and striking power, rather than the traditional Roman preference for heavy infantry formations, recognizing that Gothic warfare required rapid response capabilities and the ability to operate effectively across vast distances. Archaeological evidence from military sites associated with his campaigns revealed standardized equipment modifications designed to improve cavalry effectiveness while maintaining logistical compatibility with existing supply systems. Claudius's victory over the Alemanni at Lake Benakes in 268 AD demonstrated the tactical innovations that Illyrian commanders had developed for dealing with barbarian invasion forces. Rather than attempting to meet Germanic armies in traditional pitched battles where Roman numerical disadvantages could prove decisive, he employed coordinated attacks by multiple smaller forces that exploited barbarian supply difficulties and command coordination problems. The battle's outcome effectively ended Alemanni threats to northern Italy, while establishing Claudius as the empire's most capable military commander. The Gothic campaigns that earned Claudius his cognomen represented the most systematic Roman military response to barbarian invasions during the entire crisis period. His strategic approach emphasized cutting Gothic supply lines, isolating different tribal groups to prevent coordinated operations, and forcing engagements under conditions favorable to Roman tactical advantages. The siege operations conducted against Gothic strongholds demonstrated sophisticated understanding of logistics, engineering, and psychological warfare that reflected both traditional Roman military doctrine and innovative adaptations developed through frontier experience. Claudius's administrative reforms during his brief reign focused on restoring military discipline and improving the efficiency of imperial bureaucratic systems that had deteriorated during decades of political instability. His establishment of standardized promotion procedures, systematic record-keeping requirements, and regular inspection protocols provided the foundation for more effective military organization, while reducing opportunities for corruption and favoritism that had undermined military effectiveness. These reforms proved particularly important for maintaining unit cohesion during extended campaigns against barbarian forces. The monetary policies implemented under Claudius Gothicus addressed the severe inflation and currency debasement that had disrupted economic activity throughout the empire. His establishment of new minting facilities in Illyrian territories, particularly at Siscia, provided reliable sources of standardized coinage while reducing transportation costs and improving monetary distribution in frontier regions. The silver content of coins produced during his reign showed marked improvement over previous issues, reflecting both access to Illyrian mining resources and systematic efforts to restore confidence in imperial currency. Lucius Domitius Aurelianus, born around 214 AD in Dacia Repensis, to a family with Illyrian connections, continued the pattern of military excellence that characterized 3rd century emperors from the Danubian provinces. His early career in frontier military units provided extensive experience with the tactical challenges of defending extended border regions against multiple barbarian groups while maintaining internal security in provinces with diverse populations and competing local interests. The promotion opportunities available to capable officers from provincial backgrounds allowed him to advance rapidly through military ranks despite his relatively humble origins. Aurelian's military innovations represented the culmination of tactical developments that had evolved throughout the crisis period, combining traditional Roman organizational strengths with adaptive techniques developed through constant warfare against barbarian opponents. His creation of specialized cavalry units equipped with improved armor and weapons reflected systematic analysis of combat requirements in the mobile warfare that characterized 3rd century conflicts. Archaeological finds from military sites associated with his campaigns reveal standardized equipment modifications designed to improve cavalry effectiveness while maintaining compatibility with existing logistical systems. The reunification campaigns that restored imperial control over breakaway territories demonstrated Aurelian's understanding of both military strategy and political psychology. His systematic approach to reducing the Gallic Empire emphasized isolating different regional power centers while offering reasonable terms to communities willing to return to imperial allegiance. The siege techniques employed against fortified positions showed clear evolution from traditional Roman methods, incorporating lessons learned from decades of siege warfare against both barbarian strongholds and rebel Roman fortifications. Aurelian's construction of new defensive walls around Rome represented both a practical response to barbarian invasion threats and a symbolic assertion of imperial determination to defend the empire's heartland. The wall system, extending approximately 19 kilometers around the city's expanded perimeter, incorporated advanced engineering techniques, including multiple defensive lines, sophisticated gate systems, and provisions for coordinated artillery deployment. The project's completion within 5 years demonstrated the organizational capabilities that Illyrian administrators had developed through their provincial experiences. The economic reforms implemented during Aurelian's reign addressed fundamental structural problems that had undermined imperial stability throughout the crisis period. His establishment of standardized taxation procedures, improved collection mechanisms, and systematic auditing requirements provided more reliable revenue sources while reducing opportunities for corruption and fraud. The monetary reforms that restored silver content to imperial coinage helped stabilize prices and restore confidence in commercial transactions throughout the empire. Marcus Aurelius Probus, born around 232 AD in Sirmium, to a family with extensive military connections, represented the final phase of Illyrian military leadership during the 3rd century crisis. His upbringing in one of the most militarized regions of the empire provided early exposure to professional military culture and the strategic challenges facing frontier commanders. The educational opportunities available in Sirmium, which had developed into a major administrative centre, combined practical military training with the legal and administrative knowledge necessary for high-level governmental positions. Probus's military career began during the Gothic campaigns under Claudius Gothicus, where he gained valuable experience in the innovative tactical methods that Illyrian commanders had developed for barbarian warfare. His rapid promotion through military ranks reflected both personal capabilities and the systematic advancement opportunities that the crisis period provided for talented officers willing to accept dangerous frontier assignments. By 270 AD, he commanded substantial military forces and possessed the experience necessary for independent campaign leadership. The defensive strategies developed under Probus emphasized systematic fortification of frontier regions, combined with mobile reserve forces capable of rapid response to invasion threats. His establishment of fortified positions along the Rhine and Danube frontiers incorporated lessons learned from decades of barbarian warfare, featuring multiple defensive lines, sophisticated communication systems, and provisions for coordinated operations across extended distances. Archaeological evidence from these fortifications reveals advanced engineering techniques and standardized construction methods that facilitated rapid deployment and maintenance. Probus's agricultural and economic policies reflected understanding of the relationship between military security and economic prosperity that characterized successful Illyrian leadership. His establishment of veteran colonies in frontier regions provided both defensive capabilities and agricultural development that strengthened local economies while creating reliable recruitment sources for future military needs. The systematic approach to land distribution and agricultural development demonstrated sophisticated understanding of logistics and resource management, essential for maintaining military forces in challenging environments. The military engineering projects undertaken during Probus's reign represented the culmination of technical innovations that had developed throughout the crisis period. His construction of defensive installations, road networks, and communication systems employed advanced techniques that reflected both Roman engineering traditions and adaptive innovations developed through frontier experience. The standardization of construction methods and materials facilitated rapid deployment while ensuring compatibility with existing infrastructure systems. Gaius Aurelius Valerius Diocletianus, born around 244 AD in Salona to a family of modest circumstances, emerged from the ranks of the Illyrian military establishment to implement the most comprehensive governmental reforms in Roman history. His early career in provincial military units provided extensive experience with the administrative challenges of governing diverse populations, while maintaining military effectiveness against external threats. The educational opportunities available in Salona, which had developed sophisticated schools and libraries, provided him with the legal and administrative knowledge necessary for complex governmental reform programs. Diocletian's rise to imperial power occurred through the traditional pattern of military proclamation, but his subsequent administrative innovations reflected systematic analysis of the structural problems that had caused the 3rd century crisis. Rather than simply attempting to restore previous governmental systems, he implemented fundamental changes in imperial organization that addressed the underlying causes of political instability while preserving essential elements of Roman institutional continuity. The tetrarchy system established by Diocletian represented revolutionary innovation in imperial administration, dividing governmental responsibilities among 4 rulers while maintaining unified strategic coordination. This system addressed the practical impossibility of governing the vast Roman territories through centralized administration, while providing mechanisms for orderly succession that could prevent the civil wars that had characterized the crisis period. The selection of co-rulers based on proven administrative and military capabilities rather than hereditary claims reflected Diocletian's understanding of the practical requirements for effective governance. The administrative revolution initiated by Diocletian's tetrarchy fundamentally transformed the governance of Illyrian territories, but the system's collapse in the early 4th century created unprecedented vulnerabilities that would expose these regions to devastating barbarian invasions. The death of Diocletian in 316 AD and the subsequent civil wars between his successors shattered the coordinated defensive strategies that had protected the Danubian frontier for decades. Constantine's victory at the Battle of Chrysopolis in 324 AD restored imperial unity under a single ruler, but the damage to frontier defences and military organisation had already created opportunities that barbarian confederations were quick to exploit. The Gothic invasions that began in earnest around 376 AD represented a qualitatively different threat from the earlier raids that Roman forces had successfully contained during the 3rd century crisis. Unlike previous barbarian incursions that consisted primarily of seasonal raiding expeditions seeking portable wealth, these movements involved entire populations seeking permanent settlement within Roman territories. The Visigoths, driven westward by Hunnic pressure from the steppes, arrived at the Danube frontier with approximately 200,000 people, including warriors, families, livestock, and portable possessions that indicated their intention to establish permanent communities rather than simply conduct raids. Roman authorities initially attempted to manage this migration through traditional diplomatic arrangements that would settle Gothic populations in designated areas under Roman supervision, while utilising their military capabilities for frontier defence. Emperor Valens authorised Gothic settlement south of the Danube in 376 AD, expecting that controlled immigration would provide agricultural workers and military recruits while reducing pressure on overextended Roman military resources. However, the scale of Gothic migration overwhelmed Roman administrative capabilities, while corruption among Roman officials responsible for managing the settlement process created conditions that rapidly deteriorated into open warfare. The Battle of Adrianople in 378 AD marked the catastrophic failure of Roman attempts to control Gothic settlement through military force. Emperor Valens personally led an army estimated at 40,000 men against Gothic forces that had been reinforced by other barbarian groups and Roman military deserters. The engagement demonstrated the tactical evolution that had occurred in barbarian warfare, as Gothic cavalry units coordinated with infantry formations to achieve tactical superiority over traditional Roman military arrangements. Valens died in the fighting along with approximately 2/3 of his army, eliminating the primary Roman military force responsible for Danubian frontier defence. The immediate aftermath of Adrianople created a power vacuum in the central Balkans that Gothic forces quickly exploited through systematic occupation of major urban centres and transportation networks. Philippopolis fell to Gothic assault in 379 AD, after a brief siege that demonstrated barbarian adaptation of Roman siege techniques. The city's capture provided Gothic forces with substantial supplies of weapons, agricultural products, and manufactured goods, while establishing a secure base for further operations. Archaeological evidence from the siege includes Gothic manufactured arrowheads and spear points that show clear Roman influence in their design and metallurgy, indicating rapid technological transfer between barbarian and Roman military systems. Sirmium, the former imperial capital and crucial administrative centre for the Illyrian provinces, endured repeated Gothic attacks throughout the 380s that gradually weakened its defensive capabilities and economic foundations. The city's strategic position at the confluence of major river systems made it an attractive target for Gothic forces seeking to control transportation networks connecting the Danube frontier with interior Balkan regions. Roman garrison forces, reduced by casualties from earlier engagements and lacking reliable reinforcement from imperial authorities, proved increasingly unable to maintain effective resistance against coordinated Gothic siege operations. The Gothic occupation of Sirmium in 441 AD marked the effective end of Roman administrative control over the central Illyrian territories. Unlike earlier barbarian raids that focused on portable wealth, Gothic forces systematically dismantled Roman governmental institutions while establishing their own administrative systems based on tribal leadership structures. Roman legal codes were replaced by Germanic customary law. Latin administrative language gave way to Gothic vernacular in official proceedings, and traditional Roman taxation systems were abandoned in favour of tribute arrangements that reflected barbarian political traditions. Hunnic invasions under Attila's leadership during the 440s and 450s AD created additional pressures that further destabilised the remaining Roman territories in the Balkans. Unlike Gothic populations that sought permanent settlement, Hunnic forces conducted systematic destruction campaigns designed to eliminate potential resistance and extract maximum portable wealth from conquered territories. The Hunnic military organisation, based on highly mobile cavalry units capable of covering vast distances rapidly, proved particularly effective against the dispersed Roman defensive positions that had survived earlier Gothic conquests. The Siege of Naissus in 442 AD demonstrated the sophisticated siege capabilities that Hunnic forces had developed through contact with Roman and Persian military technologies. Attila's army employed advanced siege engines, including torsion catapults and battering rams, that enabled them to breach fortifications that had previously withstood barbarian assault attempts. The city's fall after a 3-month siege eliminated one of the last major Roman strongholds in the central Balkans, while providing Hunnic forces with substantial quantities of military equipment and trained personnel. Salona's resistance to barbarian conquest during this period reflected both the city's strong defensive position and the determination of its Romanized population to maintain their cultural and political independence. The city's location on a narrow peninsula provided natural defensive advantages that were enhanced by massive stone walls constructed during earlier periods of Roman investment. The harbour facilities allowed continued contact with Roman authorities in Constantinople and Italy, providing access to military reinforcements and supplies that enabled sustained resistance against barbarian siege operations. The demographic transformation of Illyrian territories during this period involved complex population movements that fundamentally altered the ethnic composition of the region. Roman populations in exposed rural areas faced forced displacement or absorption into barbarian communities, while urban centres became islands of Roman culture surrounded by increasingly barbarian-controlled countryside. Archaeological evidence from abandoned Roman villas reveals hasty evacuation patterns, with valuable portable items removed but larger installations left intact, suggesting that Roman landowners initially expected to return once military conditions stabilized. Avar invasions beginning in the 560 SAD introduced another layer of complexity to the already chaotic ethnic situation in former Illyrian territories. The Avars, a nomadic confederation from the Central Asian steppes, brought military technologies and organizational methods that proved superior to both surviving Roman forces and earlier barbarian settlers. Their rapid conquest of Pannonia and expansion into Dalmatia eliminated the last vestiges of Roman administrative control, while establishing a powerful nomadic empire that dominated the central Balkans for over 2 centuries. Avar military organization relied on heavy cavalry units equipped with advanced metallurgical products including laminated armor systems and composite bows that provided significant tactical advantages over both Roman and Germanic opponents. Archaeological excavations at Avar burial sites reveal sophisticated metalworking techniques that combined steppe traditions with technologies acquired through contact with Byzantine and Persian civilizations. The standardization of weapons and equipment across Avar territories indicates centralized production systems and systematic military organization that enabled coordinated operations across vast geographic areas. The establishment of Avar administrative centers at strategic locations throughout former Illyrian territories created new political structures that replaced both Roman governmental institutions and earlier barbarian arrangements. These centers, typically located at elevated positions with good defensive characteristics and access to transportation networks, served as bases for Avar military operations, while providing administrative coordination for tribute collection and population management. The Avar stronghold at Kestali controlled access to major alpine passes, while maintaining surveillance over surviving Roman populations in coastal regions. Slavic migrations during the 6th and 7th centuries AD represented the final major demographic transformation of former Illyrian territories. Unlike earlier barbarian movements that involved organized military forces seeking conquest or settlement, Slavic expansion occurred through gradual infiltration of agricultural populations seeking available farmland in regions disrupted by previous conflicts. Archaeological evidence suggests that Slavic communities initially established small settlements in marginal areas avoided by earlier inhabitants, gradually expanding into more desirable territories as their populations grew and earlier inhabitants relocated or were absorbed. The agricultural technologies employed by Slavic settlers proved particularly well adapted to the environmental conditions of former Illyrian territories. Their emphasis on grain cultivation, livestock management, and forest exploitation provided sustainable economic foundations that enabled permanent settlement in regions where earlier populations had relied heavily on trade and urban-based economic activities. Archaeological evidence from early Slavic settlements reveals sophisticated agricultural tools, storage systems, and livestock management facilities that indicate systematic adaptation to local environmental conditions. Slavic settlement patterns typically emphasize small, dispersed communities located near reliable water sources and fertile agricultural land. Unlike Roman urban centers or barbarian strongholds that concentrated populations for defensive purposes, Slavic villages spread across the landscape in patterns that maximized agricultural productivity while minimizing vulnerability to military attack. This settlement strategy proved highly effective in regions where centralized political control had collapsed and traditional defensive arrangements no longer functioned reliably. The survival of Romanized populations during this period of demographic upheaval occurred primarily in coastal cities and mountainous refuges where geographic conditions provided natural defensive advantages. Salona maintained its Roman character throughout the 5th and 6th centuries despite repeated barbarian attacks, serving as a crucial link between surviving Roman territories and the broader Mediterranean world. The city's population during this period included substantial numbers of refugees from interior regions, creating a concentrated Roman community that preserved classical cultural traditions while adapting to increasingly difficult political circumstances. Epidaurus, protected by its position on a narrow peninsula and continued access to maritime trade networks, developed into another major centre of Roman cultural continuity. The city's bishops maintained contact with religious authorities in Constantinople and Rome, preserving Christian institutional structures while adapting liturgical practices to accommodate the changing demographic composition of their congregations. Archaeological evidence from religious sites reveals continued use of Latin in religious contexts, while vernacular languages increasingly dominated secular activities. Mountain communities in the Dinaric Alps developed distinctive survival strategies that combined traditional Illyrian pastoral practices with Roman administrative techniques and Christian religious frameworks. These communities typically occupied elevated positions that provided both defensive advantages and access to seasonal grazing areas essential for livestock management. Their political organisation evolved from Roman municipal structures toward clan-based arrangements that could function effectively without external governmental support, while maintaining sufficient military capability to resist barbarian raids. The transformation of religious practices during this period reflected both the Christianization of barbarian populations and the adaptation of Christian institutions to changing political circumstances. Arian Christianity, favoured by many Germanic tribes, competed with Orthodox Christianity for influence among barbarian populations, while creating theological divisions that complicated political relationships between different barbarian groups. Archaeological evidence from religious sites reveals the construction of new churches according to barbarian architectural preferences while maintaining traditional Christian liturgical arrangements. Monasticism emerged as a crucial institution for preserving classical learning and Christian traditions during the political chaos of the 5th and 6th centuries. Monastic communities established in remote locations throughout former Illyrian territories maintained libraries, scriptoriums, and schools that preserved Latin literary traditions while adapting classical educational methods to contemporary needs. The monastery at Salona maintained one of the largest libraries in the Western Balkans, with manuscripts that included classical literary works, Christian theological treatises, and practical manuals covering agriculture, medicine, and engineering. The gradual emergence of successor kingdoms during the 6th and 7th centuries created new political frameworks that combined barbarian military organisation with adapted Roman administrative practices. These kingdoms typically controlled limited territories centred on major urban centres or strategic geographic positions, lacking the resources and organisational capabilities necessary for governing the vast territories that had characterised earlier Roman provincial administration. Their political legitimacy derived from military success and the ability to provide security for subject populations rather than from traditional Roman concepts of legal authority and institutional continuity. The kingdom of the Ostrogoths under Theodoric established administrative systems that consciously attempted to preserve Roman legal and governmental traditions while accommodating Gothic military and political requirements. Theodoric's capital at Ravenna maintained Roman architectural styles and ceremonial practices while implementing policies designed to maintain peaceful coexistence between Gothic and Roman populations. His legal code combined Roman civil law with Germanic customary practices, creating hybrid legal systems that influenced subsequent political developments throughout the former Western Roman Empire. The transition from Roman provincial identity to medieval ethnic formations occurred gradually through complex processes that involved intermarriage, cultural exchange, and the adaptation of political institutions to changing demographic realities. Roman legal concepts of citizenship gave way to ethnic identity markers that emphasize cultural practices, religious affiliations, and political loyalties rather than formal legal status. Archaeological evidence reveals the gradual disappearance of distinctively Roman material culture as local populations adopted hybrid practices that combined Roman, barbarian, and indigenous elements. Urban centres that survived the barbarian invasions underwent fundamental transformations that reflected changing economic conditions and political requirements. Markets that had previously served extensive trade networks contracted to serve primarily local needs, while monumental architecture fell into disrepair as resources were redirected toward defensive installations and basic infrastructure maintenance. The Forum at Salona was gradually converted into a fortified compound that served defensive rather than commercial functions, while residential areas were modified to accommodate extended families and clan-based social organisations that differed substantially from earlier Roman household arrangements. The gradual transformation of urban centres that survived the barbarian invasions created the foundation for understanding how Illyrian cultural elements persisted into the medieval period and beyond. As traditional Roman administrative structures collapsed, new political entities emerged from the demographic chaos of the 5th through 7th centuries. The question of cultural continuity became increasingly complex. The survival of certain linguistic patterns, archaeological evidence, and institutional practices provides crucial insights into how ancient Illyrian civilization influenced subsequent historical developments in the Balkans. The linguistic legacy of the Illyrians represents one of the most contentious areas of modern scholarship, with competing theories about the survival of Illyrian language elements in contemporary Albanian and other Balkan languages generating intense academic debate. Proponents of Albanian-Illyrian continuity point to specific phonetic patterns, grammatical structures, and vocabulary items that appear to show direct descent from ancient Illyrian linguistic traditions. The Albanian language contains numerous words for geographical features, agricultural practices, and pastoral activities that lack clear Indo-European etymologies, suggesting possible preservation of pre-Roman linguistic substrates in mountainous regions where administrative control remained limited throughout the imperial period. The phonetic system of modern Albanian displays several characteristics that distinguish it from other Indo-European languages in the region, including specific sound changes and consonant clusters that some linguists interpret as evidence of Illyrian substrate influence. The treatment of certain Latin loanwords in Albanian shows patterns that differ from those found in other Romance languages, potentially indicating that these borrowings occurred through Illyrian intermediaries rather than direct contact with Latin speakers. Archaeological evidence from late Roman and early medieval sites in Albania reveals inscriptions that combine Latin administrative terminology with personal names and place names that appear to preserve pre-Roman linguistic elements. However, the limited corpus of definitively Illyrian linguistic material makes definitive conclusions extremely difficult to establish. The ancient sources that preserve Illyrian words and names provide insufficient data for reconstructing the phonetic system, grammatical structures, or vocabulary of ancient Illyrian languages with the precision necessary for detailed comparative analysis. Modern Albanian shows clear influences from Latin, Slavic, Turkish, and Greek languages that accumulated over centuries of cultural contact, making it challenging to isolate specifically Illyrian elements from later linguistic developments. Recent archaeological discoveries have provided new insights into the survival of Illyrian cultural practices in remote mountain communities where Roman administrative influence remained limited. Excavations at sites in the Dinaric Alps reveal settlement patterns, architectural techniques, and material culture that show remarkable continuity from the pre-Roman period through the early medieval era. Stone construction methods, defensive arrangements, and domestic architectural features found at these sites display characteristics that appear to preserve indigenous traditions while incorporating selected Roman technological innovations. The hilltop settlement at Kamani in northern Albania exemplifies this cultural continuity, with archaeological layers revealing continuous occupation from the late Roman period through the early medieval era. The site's defensive walls incorporate construction techniques that combine Roman masonry methods with traditional dry stone building practices characteristic of pre-Roman Illyrian settlements. Pottery assemblages from different chronological levels show gradual stylistic evolution rather than abrupt replacement, suggesting cultural continuity despite changing political circumstances. Cemetery excavations throughout the former Illyrian territories reveal burial practices that preserved indigenous traditions while adapting to Christian religious requirements. The necropolis at Kruja shows burial orientations, grave goods, and monument types that maintain continuity with pre-Roman practices while incorporating Christian symbols and Latin inscriptions. Personal ornaments, weapons, and domestic items found in these burials display decorative motifs and manufacturing techniques that appear to preserve traditional Illyrian artistic traditions despite centuries of Roman cultural influence. Archaeological contributions to understanding ancient Balkan civilization have expanded dramatically through systematic excavations conducted since the mid-20th century. The excavation of Daorson revealed sophisticated urban planning and defensive architecture that demonstrated the complexity of pre-Roman Illyrian political organisation. The site's massive stone walls, carefully planned gate systems, and internal organisation provided concrete evidence for the advanced engineering capabilities and social organisation that characterised major Illyrian settlements. Excavations revealed workshop areas, storage facilities, and residential quarters that indicated specialised craft production and social stratification within Illyrian communities. The underwater archaeological investigations at Salona have uncovered harbour installations, shipbuilding facilities, and maritime infrastructure that illuminate the sophisticated naval capabilities of Romanised Illyrian communities. These discoveries include stone-lined quays, specialised workshops for ship construction and repair, and storage facilities for maritime equipment that demonstrate the continued importance of naval activities throughout the Roman period. The preservation of organic materials in underwater contexts has provided unprecedented insights into ancient shipbuilding techniques, navigation equipment, and maritime trade practices. Major excavations at Sirmium have revealed the evolution of urban planning and architectural development from the late Republican period through the collapse of Roman authority. The systematic investigation of residential areas, public buildings, and industrial quarters has provided detailed evidence for the economic activities, social organisation, and cultural practices of one of the most important administrative centres in the Roman Balkans. Discoveries include elaborate mosaic floors, sophisticated heating systems, and evidence for specialised craft production that illustrate the prosperity and cultural sophistication achieved by Romanised Illyrian communities. The influence of Illyrian heritage on medieval and modern Balkan peoples involves complex questions of ethnic continuity that resist simple answers. Various groups throughout the Balkans have claimed Illyrian ancestry as part of their national identity formation processes, often emphasising selected aspects of ancient Illyrian history while minimising others that do not support contemporary political objectives. Albanian nationalist movements of the 19th and 20th centuries promoted theories of direct descent from ancient Illyrians as part of their efforts to establish historical legitimacy for territorial claims and cultural distinctiveness from neighbouring Slavic populations. Croatian historical traditions have similarly emphasised connections to ancient Illyrian populations, particularly in coastal regions where Roman sources documented extensive Illyrian settlement. Medieval Croatian chronicles incorporated references to Illyrian predecessors while adapting these traditions to support contemporary political arrangements and territorial claims. Archaeological evidence from Croatian coastal sites reveals cultural continuities that span the transition from Roman to medieval periods, though the interpretation of this evidence remains contested among scholars with different theoretical perspectives. The complexity of ethnic continuity in the Balkans reflects the reality that modern national identities emerge through historical processes that involved multiple population groups, cultural influences, and political developments over many centuries. The demographic disruptions of the 5th through 7th centuries created conditions where traditional ethnic boundaries became blurred through intermarriage, cultural exchange, and political realignments that produced new social formations. Archaeological evidence suggests that survival and adaptation occurred through complex processes, rather than simple linear descent from ancient populations. Historiographical evolution in Illyrian studies reflects changing scholarly methodologies and theoretical approaches that have developed since ancient times. Classical sources including Appian's Illyrian Wars and Cassius Dio's Roman history provided the foundation for understanding Illyrian political development and military organisation. Though these accounts reflect Roman perspectives and political objectives, rather than neutral historical analysis. Medieval chroniclers incorporated classical references to Illyrian peoples while adapting these traditions to contemporary political and religious frameworks that emphasized Christian identity in medieval political arrangements. Modern archaeological and linguistic research has substantially expanded understanding of Illyrian civilization while raising new questions about cultural continuity and ethnic identity. The development of systematic excavation techniques, scientific dating methods, and comparative linguistic analysis has provided evidence for the complexity and sophistication of ancient Illyrian societies that earlier scholars could not access. However, these methodological advances have also revealed the limitations of available evidence and the difficulty of establishing definitive conclusions about many aspects of Illyrian history and culture. Ongoing debates about Illyrian ethnogenesis reflect fundamental disagreements about the nature of ancient ethnic identity and the processes through which cultural groups formed and evolved. Some scholars emphasize the role of migration and population replacement in shaping ancient Balkan demographics, while others focus on cultural transformation and adaptation processes that occurred within relatively stable population groups. Archaeological evidence can support multiple interpretative frameworks, making scholarly consensus difficult to achieve on many fundamental questions. The legacy of the Illyrians ultimately transcends simple questions of direct ethnic descent or cultural survival. Their historical significance lies in their role as intermediaries between the classical Mediterranean world and the indigenous populations of southeastern Europe, facilitating cultural exchanges that enriched both traditions while creating new synthetic forms. The political institutions, military techniques, and cultural practices that emerge from this interaction influenced subsequent historical developments throughout the Balkans and contributed to the complex ethnic and cultural landscape that characterizes the region today. The archaeological record demonstrates that Illyrian communities achieved remarkable success in adapting to changing political circumstances while maintaining essential elements of their cultural identity. Their integration into the Roman imperial system provided opportunities for social advancement and cultural development, while preserving distinctive regional characteristics that influenced imperial policies and administrative practices. The military leadership that emerged from Romanized Illyrian communities played crucial roles in imperial defense and political development during some of the most challenging periods in Roman history. The collapse of Roman authority and subsequent barbarian invasions created conditions that tested the resilience of cultural traditions established during centuries of Roman rule. The survival of certain linguistic elements, archaeological continuities, and institutional practices suggests that Illyrian cultural influences persisted through these traumatic periods, though in modified forms that reflected adaptation to new political and demographic realities. The emergence of medieval political entities in former Illyrian territories incorporated elements of Roman administrative practice, Christian religious traditions, and indigenous cultural patterns that created distinctive regional identities. Modern scholarly understanding of Illyrian civilization continues to evolve as new archaeological discoveries, linguistic analyses, and historical interpretations provide fresh perspectives on ancient developments. The application of scientific techniques including DNA analysis, isotope studies, and advanced dating methods offers potential for resolving some long-standing debates about population movements, cultural relationships, and chronological sequences. However, the complexity of ancient ethnic and cultural processes ensures that many fundamental questions about Illyrian history will remain subjects of scholarly debate and investigation. The enduring fascination with Illyrian history reflects both the intrinsic interest of their remarkable achievements and their relevance to contemporary questions about cultural identity, political development, and historical continuity. Their success in creating sophisticated political institutions, military organizations, and cultural traditions while maintaining regional distinctiveness provides valuable insights into the processes through which ancient societies adapted to changing circumstances while preserving essential elements of their heritage. The Illyrian experience demonstrates the dynamic nature of cultural development and the complex relationships between political power, cultural identity, and historical memory that continue to shape human societies today.